Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is September 10th, 2024 at 4:30 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
see any changes needed for today's agenda, so I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. First up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will move on to department commission reports, which will be years of service recognition, which I'm going to do from the podium this evening. So council, typically when we do our years of service in the department, for less than the 25 year, we are in the department, the directors are there. So Bruce, first come on up, please, and join me up here, because really the directors are the ones that spend their time, get to know the employees and can typically add a lot more than I can do. But I think we see a pattern when we look out here with the people that are here to support our years of service today, and that's longevity. You know, I think community development might be our department of longevity more so than many others in that context, because you see the history of the city sitting right here, and the amount of people that have been here as long, if not longer than myself, is quite impressive in that context. But we are here to celebrate two of Bruce's employees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read what was written up, and I'm going to turn it over to Bruce to say a few words, but let's start off with Mindy. Mindy, if you would be so kind to come join us up at the podium. So Mindy has been a very valuable member of the staff and the community development. In the years with the city, she has grown and developed tremendously with her knowledge, skills, and abilities. She's always willing and quite able to share her knowledge and education with others. Mindy enjoys reading and loves to travel, especially if there is a beach to visit, whether it's in tropical climate or the Oregon coast. Mindy is a very dedicated daughter and mother to her daughter, Harley. And, you know, I can, you know, Mindy's one of those people that I think that for many years, she probably regretted every time I was going to call down there, because it meant that there was something going on with our report that talked about how many permits we'd done and what the valuations were. And it's like, oh no, here we go again. But anytime that there was an issue, you were there to fix it with a smile and help Mayor Tammy get the number she was looking for an upcoming presentation to a group or otherwise. And I know that's just one small area where I interacted with you over the years, but I know also your valuable role that you've played in many of the processes and transitions that have occurred over the years. So you are a true asset to the department. So I'm gonna turn this over to Bruce for any comments that he would like to add.
That was coordinated. Thank you, Mayor. You know, it is really cool to see Daunt Whitman made it out today. Daunt goes back to before Mindy, and you know, the mayor talked about longevity, and Mindy's been there. I mean, she has been there from the start. I think about the old legacy software packages that we used, old DOS-based programs that it's just crazy how far we've come. And Mindy has been so instrumental in everything that we have done to get us to where we are today. You know, she is the resource that everyone looks to for support and help. Our customers just love her, and you know, she's just a member of the family. So congratulations. It's been a great ride, and glad you're here. Do you want to?
Thank you, everyone, for coming and supporting me. And I just love what I do. I love the city of Meridian. I love the family we have in community development. My employees are all here. I couldn't do what I do without you. So thank you.
Next up, Steve. So Steve is another one of our 25-year, I don't want to say nominees, but no, 25 years of service to the city today. But Steve, quiet, but a very present person in a lot of ways. And I think that we probably pass each other more coming in and out of City Hall than most anybody else over my tenure here. And it's always a pleasure to see him. He's always got a smile on his face. So with that, Steve has extensive knowledge and experience and performs his job duties at a high level. He provides technical support and guidance to the other members of the land development team. Steve is an outdoor enthusiast. He loves spending time outside, riding his bike, or hiking amongst nature. Steve has taken some pretty remarkable photographs while out on these adventures. He also loves to be outside when in downtown Meridian. You can find him most days strolling our streets at 10 and 3 p.m. That must be when I come in and out of the building. I'm here at work before that, council, don't worry. Steve is one of the most principled people. He believes deeply in treating everyone fairly and equitably. These attributes have served him well in his role at the city. Steve is always there for his coworkers and friends and is always looking out for his coworkers on and off the clock. He is truly an amazing person to work with, and his coworkers feel blessed to call him a friend. Bruce?
This is where lies begin.
Man, I was gonna say how much I appreciate.
Oh,
that. No, Steve he is that steady guy on our team. I mean, he is so fair and equitable with people. And that's something that he brings us all back to at times. You know, we'll be in a discussion about the way somebody's approaching a project. And Steve will say, well, it's really not fair that this guy gets to do it and this guy doesn't, or whatever. And so he's just a steady voice of reason that we appreciate greatly. You know, Steve he is quiet, and he does his job, he does his work, and he does it at an extremely high level, and everybody looks up to him for support and guidance. Just love having you on the team. Seems like we've been here forever together. So, but very much appreciate Steve and all he does. So, thank you.
And with that, for those, there is some refreshments out in the lobby to help hope you'll stay and celebrate with these two wonderful and valued employees.
To first stuff. Good lesson learned. I've had our last couple of weeks problems being able to access. the Wi-Fi.
That is for our crack UDC team, who gets to stick around for a little bit.
Restart license limit again. Says.
All right. With that, we'll move on to item 25, which is the proposed Unified Development Code changes. Turn this over to Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. You should have a memo in your packet that I sent to the clerk. I'll be largely working from that as some talking points. I drew the short straw, so yeah, I get to talk, but I am supported here. It's been a team effort. Emily's back there. She's been part of the team at this table with Lacey and Bill. But again, I'll kind of facilitate this discussion a little bit and look to them when I say something not inappropriate, maybe inaccurate, or hopefully I don't say anything inappropriate. But we did want to give you a heads up. So this kind of corresponds with what you'll actually see on your regular agenda later. Bill Parsons presented to you a current round of UDC changes, and part of that, the request was to come to council earlier with some of these as a heads up, so you can start to think about the next round of changes that are coming. So that's what we're here to do. Need some direction, kind of give you a flavor for where we're headed with things, but an opportunity for council to chime in and say, well, have you thought about it this way, or you don't like the direction this is headed, or whatever the case may be. We will still vet that direction and our, thought process through the UDC focus group, and then through obviously the Planning and Zoning Commission through a public hearing before it comes back to you. These ones are, ones that we've been talking about. Some of them for months, some of them even years. Honestly, I don't know that we'll ever get it right. But that's largely because there maybe isn't a right or a wrong answer. It's what's best for our community. So that's kind of what we're trying to touch base with you on is, as we evolve as a community, what is appropriate as we regulate some of these things going forward. So I think we'll go ahead and start. I'm going to share kind of some of these topics. That we have a couple of examples, like they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. We have about 10 pictures, so hopefully that'll save 10,000 words or so for me. But the first one I think we'll talk about is fencing. And maybe before we jump too much into this, Bill, yeah, if you can share the fence examples. Generally, the way things work, right? The UDC, Unified Development Code, you're all familiar with Title 11 of City Code. Planning uses that tool to condition and regulate projects, both residential and commercial. We rely pretty heavily, obviously, on code enforcement to then enforce that. If someone builds a structure, a fence in this case, that isn't code compliant, they're the strong arm of enforcement, right, of our police department. Sometimes when there's an interpretation question, it comes back to planning and legal, oftentimes too, to say, is this a fence or not in this case? So, but at a high level, when there's question of code enforcement officers saying, hey, there's a gray area here in the code. How have we worked with this before? That's where planning kind of gets back into the game and helps that conversation. And a lot of time it is a conversation of how do we apply this? What's the intent of this code in this case? And fences is a tough one. And the two things I think we really want to, and again, Lacey's here, she's going to see this with her team more than we do in planning, but the height is an issue a lot of times, and the materials used is an issue. So we really are going to try to define that better in the UDC about what materials are appropriate and what aren't. And again, on the screen, you can see some of those materials that are questionable anyways. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder a lot of times, and we are trying to police or play referee between neighbors. Aesthetics are one piece of this. There is a life safety concern though, that really that at the heart, that's what we try to, safety first. And then we'll look to the code when there's an aesthetic or a question about the appropriateness of some of these structures and fences, and people saying, well, no, it's not a fence, it's art. Or no, it's not a fence, it's a trellis. Or no, it's not, whatever else they're going to try to call it. So again, those are some of the examples of where we want to tighten up that definition for screening purposes. So if you're screening, you know, and maybe this is a good place to just explain or acknowledge that if it's vegetation, if it's live material, we do not regulate that. So there are a lot of things, so a property owner, a lot of homeowner, in this case, a lot of these are in residential districts, can do to screen themselves, to buffer themselves, to provide some of that barrier between various properties. When it's not just vegetation though, that is largely when our code comes into apply. And again, you can't use boxes, cardboard, you can't use, and again, back to the height, berming that up, building up three or 4 foot with, you know, dirt, and then putting a 6 foot, you know, fence on top of it. We see some of those similar examples where it's like, okay, that's not the intent. It's the grade. You can't build up the grade and then build your fence on top. So, but again, back to, you know, the safety piece of this. And I'll also say, we've talked about this philosophically. We're not trying to be in people's backyards. We really don't want to regulate what they're doing. And I'm speaking for code enforcement here, but I've heard that from code enforcement. Do what you want to do in your backyard. Keep it below 6 feet. It's when it gets above that and your neighbors now can see it and then complain to us. That's where, okay, now we got to regulate those things because you are infringing on some of their, to a certain degree, right? That's not everything all the time, but that's when typically we're going to get those complaints is, hey, this is right on the property line and they built it 12 feet tall and I have to look at the backside of this thing. So that's, I think, some of the examples. I'm actually looking at these for the first time myself, where they're affixing things to existing fencing that does comply. Or again, the materials just aren't of the Meridian quality, I'll say. And we do have some of that today, again, where we prohibit boxes, sheet metal, other unsightly materials in our definition. So one other thing before I look for maybe some direction on this, we changed our process about 3 years ago, I think, something like that, 3 or 4 years ago, where we went to an automated fence permit process. We think we need to go back. It's one where it's sort of on the honor system, I guess, a way to paraphrase that. You apply online, it's only $10. So it doesn't really cost anything, but it walks you through that permit, but we don't inspect them. You basically get your own permit and you build it and you say, this is what I'm going to build and where it's going to go. And we have a record of that, but there's no real oversight of that. And I don't know that that's working well. So that's part of what we're going to talk about actually with fencing. And actually, we're going to talk about limited duration signs here in a little bit in a very similar tone with that. So I want to just put that out there too, that we're going to probably go back to doing those. You still apply online, but there's a human component where we go out and inspect what you've built to make sure it's code compliant rather than relying on the plans that you submitted, if you even submitted plans, to be compliant with code. So maybe before I turn it back over for any feedback you have, I'll look to the rest of the team to see if there's any other information regarding the first couple of parts with fencing that we should highlight.
I think that covered most of our concerns. Is that clearer definition for us is what we're looking for. I don't know that I ever tell planning, but I tell other people that we consider ourselves to be in a marriage with planning. So we enforce the code, but they have to interpret it. And so we need that 2-part relationship. And if we get people that are coming to us saying it's not a fence, then we send that back for interpretation. So if we had some clearer definition, it would help us on the enforcement side and save time for both of our teams. The other thing that we're looking at is there's a definition that just says that the fence has to remain in good repair. And it's kind of as arbitrary as customer service or common sense, that we would like that to be more defined as to what that is and look at the safety side of what good repair means and what that means between your neighbors if a fence is falling down or dilapidated.
Maybe I'll just run through. So we have 3 issues in the memo. So again, hopefully have it kind of pulled up, and I'm going to just throw the third one on the table now and then maybe look for feedback. And again, kind of the approach we're taking with that third piece of it is really the location of that. And again, back to sort of the philosophy of we really don't want to be in people's backyards. If you can do things in the building envelope, it's basically, so keep it outside your setbacks. You can do those things. The other part of that though is we currently allow a shed to encroach within your rear setback. So there really isn't a setback for a shed so long as it meets the other building code requirements. It's not 250 square feet. It has to be 200 square feet or less, but it can encroach and you can have one of those. One of the changes we're looking at is to still allow one of those encroachments, but you couldn't have a fence, a double fence. You couldn't put up, if there's an existing fence on the property line, you can't put up another fence, a dog run and a shed. You get to choose what that thing is that gets to encroach into the setback. So that is a little bit newer option that I didn't come up with it, so I'm not going to take credit for it. But one of the things I think that said, hey, within that typically 10 or 12 foot rear setback on most homes, you can put something there. Again, a shed, a dog run, another fence, whatever that thing is, but you get one of them. You can't litter your backyard, your rear yard with that. Now, those things can, again, be within your building envelope. So if you're outside the 5 foot, typically 5 foot side, 10 or 12 foot rear, and again, you start attaching it to your dwelling, then you need a building permit. You start doing these other things. We're talking about detached, standalone structures, if you will, fences. That's kind of where we're headed with some of these. So I think I'm checking my notes. Yeah, you'll still have to comply with all the other standards in building code, planning code, and whatever. So anyways, I think that's teed up, and we'll look for any feedback or questions.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Thank you, Caleb. Thanks, everybody. So how would this change work for people that already have like multiple structures within their setback? If we make this change, is that then enforceable, or would people be sort of grandfathered, quote unquote, under the previous code, or how would that work?
Yeah, and they're talking about it. I'll maybe kick that off though and just say, and again, this will even come up when we talk about limited duration signs more. Historically, I mean, most recently anyways, code enforcement works off of complaints. If it's been there, it's not like we're necessarily going to advertise this to everybody and now you get to rat your neighbor out that's had 2 sheds in their backyard forever. It's typically when something new goes in, right? So going forward, I imagine that's where we're going to see most of the complaints is going forward when someone changes something on their property, not for ones that have already been there for months and years. So again, we're not looking to go out and make everyone then comply with any new standards. Typically we get contacted when something changes on the property and a neighbor says, hey, check out my neighbor. They're doing something new and different. We think it violates code.
Mr. Mayor, maybe a follow-up.
Councilman Schrader.
I understand we're not looking to create problems where problems don't exist, but I think this may be more of a legal question for Emily. Does making this change in the UDC then make it enforceable upon people that previously had these structures? I'm just concerned that there's an individual that may have like a dog run and a shed, maybe also a fence, and then suddenly now this is something that someone could complain about.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Strader, this is, depending on this scenario, it might already be a violation of the UDC, and this would be a clarification to make it more obvious what is and what isn't allowed in the setback. Often that setback is protecting an easement or just giving space between properties. So generally the scenario that you're setting up is probably already illegal. But to answer your question, depending on, so there are land uses and then there are kind of behaviors that that violate the UDC, and depending on which we'd have to kind of do some analysis, but we don't really have grandfather rights in Meridian. So if the code changes, we don't surprise people. We don't, go looking to find who violates this brand new code. But if the code changes, sometimes existing sometimes existing behaviors are then illegal. It doesn't happen very often that we change the code and then we surprise everybody. It does happen, And that comes up a lot with parking or kind of the more ephemeral uses of property. And this is probably more on that side.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Sorry, I promise it's my last one. I think why I'm more concerned about this is when it comes to something like parking, or at least the things I remember that we've dealt with in UDC changes, they've been things that could be remediated easily. Like, don't park your RV in front of your house for 3 days, et cetera, stuff like that. Here, though, if there are already a bunch of existing structures, like I'm a little more concerned about someone having to comply and then it being costly, difficult, et cetera. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but I don't know, it just kind of came up as a concern that I have.
Mayor, Councilmember Strader, I don't think you're going to see that come up. You're allowed one shed in your setback as it is, but we're trying to move more toward a model that doesn't look so much in people's backyards and allows people to generally do what they need to do in their backyards while still protecting the setback, which is, again, typically an easement or just that buffer between properties. So I wouldn't say you're overthinking it, but I don't think we're going to see an uptick in neighbors ratting each other out or code enforcement going to look for things. Really, backyard code enforcement issues are everyone's least favorite. We really would like to facilitate people doing what they need to do in their backyard.
Maybe a direct question, because double fences, are double fences illegal currently? They are currently illegal, so
Yes.
anything that's there now, someone could go and address if they wanted
Anyway,
to.
That's correct.
Could I add a little? So in two sections is one, this is talking about the fences, but the accessory structures and the setbacks is already enforced in different sections. And so it actually is just adding clarification that you can't call your dog run a fence in your fence code. It would already allow one structure in your rear setback, whether that's a shed, a play set, a dog run, any of those are your violations for the accessory structures. The fence would actually be allowing that to be one of the options you could have in your setback in addition as an option. So they're still separated. This just allows you to have one, including a fence as an option. It would actually allow you to have one that currently you couldn't have a double fence in your rear setback at this point.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
just a quick question. This is maybe a little bit more on for code enforcement. Can you give me a sense of how big of an issue this is in terms of the amount of time you spend responding to complaints about fencing? And then as a quick follow-on, I'm curious, with these changes, maybe as proposed or some small modifications, are you hoping it would reduce the number of complaints or just give you more clarity about how to then proceed when those complaints come in?
I don't think that it will reduce complaints. I don't know how many complaints we get right now, but they are time consuming when we do get them in the investigation side, and the fact that they're between two private parties and it's normally a civil situation. You have to get compliance from one party or the other or both to see the fence if it's not visible from public view. So they are something that we hold open for a couple of months. We have one that's been sent to prosecution right now, and the prosecution set for summons is usually approximately 3 months before we see it go to court if they screen it in. So I think if we had clearer definitions, better answers, more options, then we could alleviate some of those, maybe from seeing them go to prosecution in the first place. It would be nicer for us if we had those clear answers that we can say, yes, that's okay. We have other definitions that are holding that height is really the one that gets us. It's just when people decide that they're not calling it a fence and it's something else that gets difficult, because then they can allow heights to be different if it's not a fence.
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor.
members of the council too, just the reason why we show you these examples is a lot of the complaints that planning sees is the fact that people want more privacy. And so what they're really doing is they're extending their fence. And then they get very creative with the way their terminology. Some call it art. Some call it a hedge, and it's a fake shrubbery. So we put this in here just to show you all the things that we deal with. And that's why it's important for us to say, hey, do we have our code right? Because Caleb is correct. The majority of our complaints is when they're adjacent to a common open space, they want to do double fencing, or they want a taller fence because they want more privacy. I do also want to let the council know that we also have the alternative compliance process for our fencing as well. So there's always weird anomalies out there, so we still have that option for homeowners to take advantage of too. So I just at least wanted to bring your attention to the first graphic here with the two homes. You can see where one homeowner is complying with the fences right at their backyard, and the other one has put it right up against the sidewalk. So that's, in this particular scenario, you can see here, that person that done it right wants the opportunity to use their side yard. But because of our current fence code, they had to put their fencing up along their backyard, which exposes their side yard. So just want to give you some of the complaints or some of the questions or comments we get from homeowners as they look to erect fences on their property.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Mr. Mayor, for all three of you, over the years, we've done this dance so many times. And each time that I've seen it done, I've seen planning and code and legal all come to the table. And we're working closer each time, trying to clarify problems that we didn't really see before, but now we're seeing. We're seeing, I don't know what it is about people wanting to do things, but they seem to get more creative as time goes on things that don't fit the code. And the way I look at this is, from a lot of history, is the three of you respectively working together, trying to make sure that we can be more efficient from the planning department. And as much as I love technology, I am really glad to hear that the human touch is going to come back into those fence permits. And from the code enforcement point, you depend upon clear language that's approved by legal, that's included in planning documents. And from legal perspective, Emily, you've always been great in bringing these things forward and making sure that we try to find a solution. Because our goal, if I'm not mistaken, and we should probably say that, is it's compliance. It's still first and foremost compliance, with enforcement being what we have to do when we cannot gain compliance with the situation and someone's in violation of our code. Would that be a correct statement? Thank you.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I think the intention was to introduce these things, not necessarily for us to litigate or debate. And so I appreciate this. And I think it's more, let's run through these, and then council will likely be capturing questions that we can send to you that can then be answered as maybe part of a more formal presentation.
I'm wearing a tie though, it's pretty formal. So, I mean, but no, that's great. Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. I'll take whatever comments you have now, but yeah, in the interest of time, we'll move on. Feel free to email, call any of us. We'll move on to the, what's secondary dwelling. So again, the outline being the memo. This one really, so we've had in our code for some time, secondary dwellings as an allowance. A lot of you may recall, although some of you are newer, that we looked at this as part of the housing affordability kind of equation over the last few years. And how can we, as one of the levers to potentially pull to address the housing crisis was our accessory dwelling units or secondary dwelling units, whatever you want to call it, granny flats. Been before the council in previous years to get some idea of how much, if any, leniency there could be on these secondary dwellings on existing lots. We ran numbers. It's a very small percentage of existing lots with our existing homes on them that can actually fit an ADU on it and still meet all the setbacks and the parking requirements and all that. So part of what the presentation or discussion is today is just to further that conversation a little bit with the feasibility for these ADUs What the housing committee was looking at over the last couple of years was really twofold. So for existing subdivisions, what are those standards? And then for new proposed upcoming subdivisions where they're coming before council, maybe there's similar but different standards for those when it's accounted for early on in the development process, when they're laying out a subdivision and the lots may be a little bit wider so you can fit an ADU on it. But that's more and more happening in our society these days where you're planning for the mother-in-law's quarters, not just, oh, we got to figure out how to fit a mother-in-law's quarters on later on. So that's kind of where we're headed with this code is sort of a two-prong approach where in existing neighborhoods, recognizing and respecting the character of that existing neighborhood and not changing that too much, or you just drive down and like, well, there's an ADU, there's an ADU, and there's an ADU. How do they blend in and fit in? Not 19 additional cars or anything like that. So, but one of the things that was talked about again with the previous body, but some of you were part of that discussion, was the parking requirement. So our code today requires car parks based on the number of bedrooms and on the property. So not just in this case, it wouldn't just be your single family home, it'd be plus the ADU. So depending on how many homes you have already in your home, you could potentially add one more bedroom and not have to provide any additional parking. Because they're grouped. Bill can correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't actually put this, but I think it's up to two, is two in a garage, and then two in a parking pad, and then 3 and 4 is grouped together, and then 5 or more bedrooms is the next level where you got to have basically a 3-car garage and 3 pads. So that's how it's currently worded in code. Again, previous direction was, nope, that seems appropriate. We don't want to modify that, but I just wanted to check in and let you know that's how we're operating is, nope, you'd still have to meet the parking requirements per the code, just like everybody else. And then the other one that I don't know that there was consensus back when we got the feedback from council, and this is why I'm here again, there was some notion of, well, if you got the neighbor to say it was okay, so the neighbor or neighbors, we didn't get that far down the line, maybe the setback, would be okay. If the neighbor's like, okay, yeah, we're okay with you encroaching in the rear setback with one of your ADUs. If you got something in writing from that neighbor saying it was okay, or some form of a variance to that, maybe the setback could be some alternative compliance or some variance. I shouldn't say variance because it's not necessarily a hardship, but to the setback. So again, not really proposing any of that. A lot of this is to clean up so it marries with our building code. We get quite a few of these where someone says they're building a garage and the garage is really nice and it looks like you could fit your mother-in-law in it. And they say, nope, this is my garage. So we're trying to tighten that up a little bit too, to say, you have a bathroom, you have, a nice patio looking over this, again, it quacks like a duck. And so we're trying to marry up terms and codes with our building code as well. So again, a lot of it comes to neighborhood character, right? Enforce that, make sure they have the parking, the adequate parking, that it meets all the setbacks as if it were another dwelling. So, and then part of that is also mirroring the building permit process. So we have an ADU permit you pull now, but we're gonna really make it, again, feel like almost mirror the single family permit. So if you're building a new residence, it's the same thing. Our processes are the same. It gets routed to the same people to review. So we ensure that it's on a foundation. It's hooked up to our sewer and water. All of those things are present. So I think.
Caleb, a
That's
question
somewhat
on
close.
this
Yeah.
rear setback.
Mhm.
What is the utility setback requirement? Because is that the same as the city setback requirement, or are they two different? 5 feet for utility?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it does vary, and it does vary by zone a lot of times on what the utility need is. Typically, so your R15 and your R40 zones, you can go down to 3-foot setbacks. So typically that easement, then the public utility drainage easement is smaller. Most of the time that's platted with your subdivision. So it's on the face of the plat and it's something that's dedicated at the recordation of the subdivision. But the width of those do vary widely. Typically, the exterior boundary is 10 foot. That's pretty standard and has been for some time. The exterior boundary of a subdivision is typically 10. Some irrigation easements, though, can be up to 100 feet, as small as 5 or 10. But again, typically they don't. So again, they're not the same. Setback does not equal easement. but a lot of times they do overlap and are real similar, if not the same, particularly in the.
And that's where I was going to get counsel is like, you- even though your neighbor says it's okay, you still have a certain limit that you're not able to get into.
And Mr. Mayor, that's a good point. I'll also add to that, your HOA. A lot of our subdivisions have CCNRs and you may not be able to do it with your HOA either. So some of this thought process was, well, let's make sure the city regulations, if it's not a life safety type of a regulation and whatnot, let's get out of the way and let the HOAs police themselves. And if they allow it per their CCNRs, what do we care? Don't violate easements, right? Provide the required parking for whatever standard the citywide standard is. But it's a good point, Mayor. And again, just to piggyback on that, you still need to go through, if you have a HOA, get their approval for whatever this thing's going to look like. But we are trying to, again, kind of clarify that, unify that, make sure it's clear what our process is and what the standards are when you want to build one of these.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
just from a practical perspective, I'm curious, how do we prevent someone from building within a utility easement? Is there some sort of a check in our process? Because we might permit it. We don't want, from a practical perspective, we don't want someone building something that can't be there.
Councilman Strader, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader. Yes, so that is part of our, and why I said it's going to really mirror the single family review. You basically have the recorded subdivision plat and you're looking at, okay, where are the easements or encumbrances? You know, most of the time it parallels your property lines. Sometimes it doesn't. It can go to 45. So we should be looking at those plats when we're reviewing the building plans, and they're supposed to put them on their site plan where the easements are, but we are verifying them against recorded documents to say, okay, now if you don't pull a permit and you just build it, we aren't verifying that, obviously. So there are, you know, like some of these fences, they didn't pull a permit. There's swimming pools. There are other encumbrances that aren't adhered to. But again, to answer your question, we're verifying that. That's one of the main reasons for our process. I will just say we don't have this totally figured out yet, and we still have some questions with addressing. So some of these, you know, do we give them a separate address? Is it and a half street or, you know, 33 and a half, or how do we do these? Does it matter if it's turned sideways and attached to the single family dwelling? So we got to talk with EMS some more, make sure we're unified in that. And some more things. But again, just getting this back on your radar a little bit, and we'll take feedback when your thoughts or any feedback you have. Again, did I miss anything with that one you guys want to add? Okay. I think then, if there's nothing now, I'm going to jump to the third one we wanted to cover today, and that is our limited duration signs. So again, I mentioned it already. This one's automated. I don't know a percentage. I don't know how many are out there. A very small percentage, though, I'll say actually pull permit anymore because it's sort of on the honor system. And we're like, you know, and back to, you know, the 3 E's, right? We're trying to educate people to know that, you know, that this is necessary. But a lot of times it comes down to enforcement when there's a safety concern. You put this right on an intersection, it's blocking your ability to see oncoming traffic. Code enforcement will step in, or businesses say, hey, there's 19 of these in front of one business. Why do they have one every 5 feet? We'll go check it out. But this one is, I don't want to say it's becoming more and more of a problem, but it's been, and I'll let Lacey, maybe I'll just turn it over to you now and you can tee this one up. Because this one, I'll just say too, this one, we have some differing opinions on what's appropriate here. So some of that direction might be good from council.
So historically, and I'm going to guess that we have someone in this room that's an expert in the history, is that this was the one code in the UDC that code enforcement would proactively enforce. And so before snowfall and after snowfall, usually around October and March, we would go down and go to every main intersecting street, all the way down them through all of our jurisdictions, how we have our areas assigned, and go inform all of the business owners that they are required to get these permits or remove their signs. It's very time consuming. I mean, when I say October and March, that's what we're doing in October and in March. 2020 came along and there was something that happened during that year that created less contact. And so in a way of trying to be creative in enforcement and of contact and how to continue these is that we stopped going in October and in March and having business owners go in and get their permits. and instead looked for other violations of the regulations. And so the regulations have standards and the requirements that they only post one limited duration sign, that they're so far away from any other permanent sign or another limited duration sign, that they stay in good repair. Another time, I think we use the word good repair. So when we see these other violations, we enforce upon those instead of all of them individually. So my dream and my first option of looking into rewriting this section would be to write it similar to our yard sale and garage sale codes. We do have regulations that restrict yard sales, and it keeps people from having them too frequently or for too long. Keep all of those standards and regulations that we currently have in the code, but actually remove the requirement for the permit and just deal with the violations of other standards and regulations that become a problem, of a sign that's in a clear vision triangle or causing a hazard. So that would be one way of handling them. That without the permit would likely remove the time restrictions. And that's where we get a little bit of our discrepancies. They're called limited duration times, but without a permit, you can't really tell what the restriction of time is. So a second option would be to remove the permit requirement and make them all for the maximum time of 120 days, which is what the current code allows for. You can get them in different increments, but basically go with them for 120 days and find a way, probably using one of our record keeping systems, to either allow the business to apply for an application and just say that they're posting it on this date to start that timeline, or for code enforcement to become aware of a sign, we deal with it for a different thing, that we would do that ourselves and start that timeline for that 120 days. Or the third option is to keep it the way that it's written. The problem is that we just don't have the staffing on either side to realistically go and spend 2 months out of our time. And it's the only code that we do proactively enforce in the UDC.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Thank you. Can you just walk me through a little bit more, like, what's the process? And I mean, this was I had to Google what's a limited duration sign when I saw this on the agenda. I'm like, what is this? So I don't understand internally our process, kind of what it's for and its purpose. So if you could give me a, limited duration signs for dummies talk, I would appreciate it.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Taylor, happy to do that. That was part of our internal discussions. Same thing. If I'm a business owner, I go to our website, I see nowhere on that website how to apply for a limited duration sign. So there's problem number one, is business owners don't know that we have a permitting process. Two, as Caleb mentioned, it's automated. So it isn't, we built a series of questions. They answer those questions appropriately, they get a permit issuance. It's like, you're approved, but they don't have to provide any documentation on site that they got an approval from us. So code enforcement goes out there. They don't know if that sign's approved or not unless they look in the system or they go ask the business owner. So to ask, three, if you want to apply for a permit, and I had this email with Councilwoman Strader, so she's very aware of how cumbersome it is. A business owner has to go onto our website, find our online portal, make sure they know which department they're, create an account, create a password, get on, then know exactly where to find your permit. And there's 3 different departments. There's land development, there's building, there's planning, and they need to go under planning. Click on planning, go in and accept the terms of use, the disclaimer, and then search for your limited duration sign. And now you have to go in there and physically fill out all the questions they ask you and upload your drawings as what those are. And then again, if you meet that criteria, it gets pushed out to an approval and no one even reviews it or approves it. It's the honors. So it sounds great in theory, but in practice, we've realized it has not worked as well as we had hoped. Yes, has it relieved some review time for staff and freed up us to do other things? Yes, it has. But are we getting rich off of it? No, because no one's applying, and 2, no one's verifying. So it's actually created more work for code enforcement, I would say, than it has, and reduced less work for planning. But I'm with Caleb. I think at some point we need to redirect this. open up our lines of communication, get with the mayor's office, figure out how we can better advertise this and help educate people. And then teach people how to use the system better. And we're having those conversations.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
can I just continue on that just real quick, a little finer point? So at its heart, so our sign code's been around for a while now in its current version, largely with some smaller tweaks, but I'll say 15 years or so. The limited duration was meant for those promotional events, a weekend, a holiday, a whatever, limited duration, right? A weekend, 30 days, 60 days, up to 120. And we've said, you know what, let's simplify that. You can just get 120. You don't have to use all 120, but you can get up to 120. But the limited duration, that's the part. It's supposed to be, it's not your permanent brick and mortar sign. You get one of those. You also get these banner signs, these flag signs, the A-frame signs. So there's regulations that talk about, they're portable, right? That's the idea with these. So the concern though is if you don't have any limit to that duration that they're out there, you're just going to get littered with a whole bunch of temporary and sometimes dilapidated. I mean, some of these are in disrepair. That's not really what you want to see driving down the road necessarily. I don't know where that line is, right? No right or wrong necessarily, but I think we need to be a little careful with this. But that's the intent with these is, yep, we recognize you're going to have, you know, a Black Friday sale, those types of things. You can do some extra advertising. Those shouldn't be left out 24/7, 365.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Thank you. So I did go through this process with a local business owner that lives near my district. I was trying to help this person without getting into their specific situation, navigate this process. And I found it to be extremely cumbersome and not intuitive at all. I think a lot of this could be handled by streamlining the process, talking about what you don't want to see. So like, it would make more sense to me to have a process where, and I think we'll all think about it more, but maybe a process where someone has put the date on their sign somewhere that they have posted it, you know, similar to like, you know, we require certain types of verbiage on campaign signs and stuff, like something like that, that has the date maybe taped on the bottom of the sign or something. And then I think just a list of where you can't put a sign, right? You can't put a sign in a vision triangle near an intersection. You know, I think if we stick to more what you can't do and try to err on the side of supporting our businesses, I think that would be helpful. You know, if they're in disrepair, we might take them from you, you know, things like that. But just the way the process is now, I totally agree. It has to be reworked. It is, for anyone that's just trying to follow it, it's completely confusing. And what I thought, the funniest thing to me, just like maybe one piece of feedback, like the affidavit of legal interest, for example, like a business owner, you know, and what's funny is that actually is not necessarily required for certain things. It's very confusing what is required. What came out through the wash to me was, at the end of the day, if you go on Google Maps and print that and draw a circle where you're going to put your sign and send it to us, that's ultimately what we were looking for. I think maybe if we just figure out what parts of the process we're actually using, that might be a way to attack it, or a way that the sign itself would indicate where it was put out or something. Like, I get it. We don't want to see signs everywhere, but it is like, from a practical standpoint for a business owner, they need the ability to promote their business if they're having special events. So I really do think we need to make this a little more user-friendly. Like, it's a really difficult process the way it's currently happening. So I appreciate you trying to tackle it. I'm not sure if we've gotten to the answer yet, but definitely we need to rework it for sure.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, the other component is the business owners don't know the setbacks for the signs, because we do specify they have to be 50 feet apart from one another. There's a certain size criteria depending on whether or not it's on the building or along the street. And so again, all of that was built into the system to help try to guide them. But if they don't apply for a permit or they don't know how to get to it, it's a moot point. They don't know what they don't know. So I after you shared that email with me, I could see I see why people aren't getting permits anymore. Because I know I like technology. I like things to be easy and intuitive, and it's not. And when you don't have things that are focused on the customer, then you don't have people applying for things. So I totally get that aspect.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
maybe just some initial feedback to it. To me, it's such a strange concept to get a permit to advertise. I mean, I get it. I understand the reasoning behind it, and I understand it's not unique to Meridian at all. It's just a strange concept. Um, my, my feedback would be, how do you make it so that it doesn't become a more burdensome, time-consuming exercise for code enforcement, for planning either? I'm wondering if there's a way where there's sort of and again, how many business owners know they have to actually apply for a permit? I have no idea. It just seems totally strange. I would think most business owners, especially small business owners, wouldn't think that they even need to do that. They might maybe find out from us, hey, you're not in compliance. So maybe would probably want to think on this, but it would seem, is there maybe a way where there's sort of a default, yes, you can do this for a time, instead of having to apply for a permit, there's just a time restriction on limited one. I don't know. Again, just kind of thinking out loud, but I would hate for you guys to be involved in temporary sign permits when there's so many other things that you guys have to do. It seems just really odd. So I would be very much interested in finding a way where it's more streamlined, simple, and maybe you're just automatically in compliance. You can do that up to a certain amount of time. Maybe 120 days is too long. Maybe we can shorten that time frame. I don't know, but it's just some of my initial thoughts on that.
So, Mr. Mayor, we'll, I think, kick that around a little bit more. I think that's kind of where Lacey wanting to head with this is like yard sales. You don't have to have a permit to have a yard sale. We're kind of watching to make sure you don't put it in the vision triangle and make sure you don't have a yard sale every weekend. So it is some work. We're not going to get totally, we got to do some monitoring, but that's kind of where it's headed. Maybe you don't have to pull a permit, but you got to comply with the code. So appreciate that feedback. If there's any more comments, we certainly can. I know you have executive session though too, so I don't know how much time you want to spend on this. And
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cowner.
Just a couple quick comments then as we wrap up. Thanks for bringing this early. I think this helps. It gets kind of the wheels turning. We kind of tell us what you're going to come tell us, then you'll tell us, then we can deliberate. Some suggestions. Things that I would like to see maybe as we move forward. I love the memo where we've got the issue, proposed solution, miscellaneous information. A couple, if you can, I think a couple of additional pieces that I would find very, very helpful. One, is this a life safety issue or is this a quality of life aesthetics issue? I think for me to be able to, sometimes I look at something as, oh, that's just, to make it look pretty, but there may be a life safety element. So being able to call that out and why specifically it is life safety or why it is just aesthetics or quality of life. I think there were some good questions that came up about some of the historical decisions about this. Not looking for you to copy the minutes, but a Twitterized version of this was the last time the city council addressed this. Here was the history then. It gives us a little flavor for how long it's been since we've addressed this or how short it's been since we've last addressed it. And I love in there, you bring a proposed solution. I would almost challenge you if you can, when it makes sense, to delineate this is a proposed solution for council action, and here are some proposed solutions from staff. I think specifically some of the feedback that Councilmember Strader provided, some of the context, Caleb, you provided about making some changes to our fence permitting, giving us a little of that flavor too. It's not just, hey, council, you need to do this. It's these are the things we're doing internally to address some of this as well.
Mr. Mayor, about 30 seconds.
Councilman Overton.
Little history, just to make sure we understand what we're all trying to accomplish here. 15, 20 years ago, when we looked at this, what we really looked at is what we didn't want to be is a city with sign pollution everywhere. And that was the term we used because people were putting signs up, sandwich boards everywhere they wanted to. There was very little regulation. When the regulation started, we needed to level the playing field on the type of signs people could put out. And it wasn't so much that it was all about being a government regulating what you do. Most of those complaints were coming from their fellow business owners who were their neighbors, who were looking at their signs being spread all over that common area or that corner. And they knew the rules and they were trying to do things right, but someone else decided to just put signs up wherever they wanted to. Hence, here we are. Here comes the police department, here comes code enforcement, because we got to come in as the referee of the game and say there are rules here and this is why we have to do this. And unfortunately, marketing companies have gotten amazing at making these beautiful, brilliant signs and selling them to people. And they don't care when they sell those signs, whether it's legal or not legal to put them up and for how long they can put them up. And it's not a little task that you have in front of you, because it continues to get tougher, because this city is growing much faster than your code enforcement team. And I know how much work you guys have got, and it's a lot to haul. But, you know, we got to remember that at the same time that we're trying to regulate these signs, we're trying to keep it as fair as we can to all the other businesses that are following the rules and doing things right and protecting their rights as well to exist in the city.
Great sage advice to end today's conversation.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to necessarily
that was
follow that,
sage
but can I?
advice at the end.
I know, well, no, Councilman Overton did a great job, but if I can just sort of wrap it up. Do you mind if just another, I just want to call your attention really to the second to last paragraph. So we will be back, another workshop on these. One of them, though, you could potentially take action on tonight, because like I said, Bill's on the regular agenda for the continued option. You mentioned home occupation swim lessons. We don't have time now, but we're prepared tonight if you're ready to act on that. Not on time to dialogue about it now, but he's got a presentation he'll make as part of that tonight that you could potentially act if you're comfortable with that. Planned unit development stuff, kind of to Councilman Cavanag's point, we are doing some stuff as staff, but the PUD ordinance just doesn't get used anymore. So we're trying to figure out a way to revive that. We'll come back at another workshop with that. And then the last one I wanted to just highlight is MDC is updating their destination downtown plan. And there are some code implications to what they're doing with that plan that I think Ashley Squire will be looking for some FaceTime with you all to have some of that discussion, which again has potential implications for the UDC, depending on how council reacts to that plan. So just read that paragraph, please, but we'll be back with some more UDC changes here in the near future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. With that,
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061C and 1D.
Second.
A motion second to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. We'll go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we come out of executive session.
I have a motion second to come out of executive session. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are out of executive session. I have a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move we adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned from our work session. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is September 10th, 2024 at 6:02 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader. Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Next up is the community invocation, which will be delivered by Nate Wheeler. If you would all please join us in the community invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection. Nate, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, Mayor, council people, council persons. Thanks again for having me here today. Please join me in prayer. Our gracious God, please be with the Meridian City Council as they make decisions about our beautiful city, which you entrusted to them. Help give them the wisdom, the clarity, the insights, and guidance as to what will be best for our city long-term. Give them the strength and courage to make the difficult decisions, and give them the grace and compassion to consider not only what is in their best interest, but in the interest of others. May you give them the wisdom beyond their own sight and vision. May the way that they lead and work together be an example not only for our great state of Idaho, but far beyond. Help them not only in their time as servants of our city, but also in their personal lives. May they see you more in the activities of their day-to-day life. May you bless their families and their relationships. May you help them be good stewards of their businesses and organizations that you have entrusted to them. And may in all things that they do and that we do as citizens of this city, glorify you. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Okay, next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we're gonna make one slight adjustment to the agenda. And for council and mayor to get out here almost on time, we did not conclude our business in executive session. So I'd like to add item number 7, executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 706, let me get the number right. 74-2061D as in David.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Oh, Mr. Mayor,
Oh,
I'm gonna need to modify that real briefly. I apologize.
okay.
Also, item number 4, we want to at least notice that the item number 4 requires a continuance. So we will not be able to hear that item tonight, I think, due to a posting error. When we get to that, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it's appropriate now or when we get to that item, the applicant is requesting September 17th as the continuance date. I do know we have a pretty lengthy agenda, so I don't know if we can discuss continuing that at a different date once we get to that item.
Okay. Mr. Neri, just on the, does it need to be included in the motion at this point in time, or was that?
It does not. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor will keep my agenda as presented.
Okay, they'll keep the original motion to adopt the agenda as amended. We have a motion second. Is there discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to as amended. First item up is a proclamation for Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. We'll be doing this if Daryl Wilson and those of the Treasure Valley Prostate Cancer Support Group would like to join me at the podium so we can do this proclamation. All right, well, as we are here once again for this opportunity to recognize this cancer, I'll go ahead and do the proclamation, turn it over to you for any comments now. Whereas prostate cancer is the most frequent diagnosed cancer in men and the second leading cause of cancer deaths in men. And whereas prostate cancer death rates declined from its peak in 1993 to its low in 2017 due to early detection through PSA testing and advances in treatment. And whereas it is estimated 1,660 men in Idaho will be diagnosed with prostate cancer this year, and it is estimated 210 Idaho men will die from this disease this year. And whereas 1 in 8 men have a lifetime probability of developing prostate cancer, but the 5-year survival rate approaches 100% when prostate cancer is diagnosed early. And whereas September has widely been recognized as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month with origins back to 1989. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, do hereby proclaim September 2024 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Meridian, encourage all citizens to join communities across our nation to increase the awareness about the importance for men to make an informed decision with their healthcare provider about early testing and detection for prostate cancer. Date this 10th day of September 2024. So thank you for being here. Daryl, any comments you'd like to make? Or your
Just that it is important, which is why I do this as often as I can and advocate for prostate cancer awareness. I typically don't ask for funds. It's awareness that I'm trying to bring about. I'm an example of that, I think. At 59, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Didn't even know I had a prostate cancer. People didn't talk about that. My grandfather had died of prostate cancer. All I knew was he died of cancer. We need to talk about cancer more, and that happens more, and prostate in specific. It's got similar numbers to breast cancer and gets half the attention. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, please.
With that, we'll move on to item 2, which is resolution number 24-2471. Council, you may or may not remember that this year the legislature changed the law as it pertains to Planning and Zoning Commission, where we're required to have at least one person on the planning and zoning from the area of city impact. They have a nice little formula for us to follow. And so we went through the process of put out a call for applicants, and had a couple people from in the city, a couple people from the area of city impact. So interviewed the people from the area of city impact for the consideration. And based upon when I looked at the totalitariness of where people live, where we're likely to see future applications, I felt like it was important to have someone from South Meridian, specifically the area where we've actually seen a lot of applications there on the southwestern section. And one of the areas where we've had a lot of involvement was from the Restaurant Place community, that has been there. So the person I'm bringing forward tonight for consideration lives in that area, that community, is knowledgeable of development process, but not part of the development process here. They have they purchase other people's projects and run them in the multifamily arena. But they don't do development themselves. They don't do really much here in the Treasure Valley. This is a company that does stuff outside the area primarily. But felt like that would be a good mix to bring to it. As part of that process, we also had a member of the P&Z who has had health issues that many of you may or may not be aware. So in conversations, asked him to step down and resign his position temporarily, that we would put the area of city impact appointee into that role. And then we also know we have at least one of our planning and zoning commissioners who intends to not up in January because he's moving to another community. And it'll be my intention to bring back the one who resigned for health reasons back in January. That way we don't have to expand the P and Z to a larger number. It helps us get in alignment with state law and gives someone new an opportunity to grow into it over the next few months and someone else an opportunity to heal their body so they can come back stronger for us in January. So I think it was a win-win-win to where we are. And, traditionally, we've always had someone from the area to impact. It's only recently where we haven't in that context. So I think it always brings a nice perspective to the conversation. And so that's why, it's my privilege to bring Sam Russ forward to City Council's consideration for appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission and can get him engaged here before too long. So with that, council, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mayor, not seeing any questions. Happy to make a motion. I guess do we need the clerk to read it, or we're presented it? We're okay for it.
Yes, okay for a motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman
Move we
Cantor?
approve resolution number 24-2471, appointing Sam Russ to seat 7 of the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission and providing for an effective date.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 24-2471. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. Sam, would you like to come forward and say any words? Now that it's too late? It looks like you brought your support group with you today.
Yes, brought the whole crew. So this is my wife and 7 kids with us today. Thank you for the opportunity to serve at the City of Meridian. Excited to join the P&Z board and look forward to serving the community in that capacity and what other ways that we can support you as a P&Z board. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you stepping up and helping meet that obligation, but also commitment to the community. Do you want to introduce all your kids? Because they're sitting there so great. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Russ family, and thanks for being here. And you don't need to stay longer than this portion if you'd like to. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, then with that, we'll move into our action items. First item up is a public hearing for proposed solid waste fee increase, which is item 3. I'll turn this over to Director McVeigh.
All right, thanks, Mayor and Council. So this is, again, our public hearing, no changes from our last time we were here. We did send you guys the follow-up information that you requested. We do have Republic Services here tonight if you have any additional questions, but we did not receive any public feedback over this period. So with that, any questions that you might have? If no questions, we're planning to bring this back as a resolution in 2 weeks.
Thank you, council. Any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Well, I just one question either for you or for Republic. Since they have held the contract with Meridian, have they ever requested a rate increase less than what the contract allows?
Don't think so. I think it's generally been either the 90% of CPI and then the 2 market labor adjustments. They did do a decrease
That's what I was gonna
last
say. is
year.
We've not asked for less than the 90%. We do continue to give backs. Like we gave, I think the first market adjustment, we asked for 11 cents on a 95-gallon cart, and we gave 9 of those cents back last year. We also continue to provide like the VETC CNG credit, which is amounting to 14 cents per year this year. So in spirit, we are.
Fair enough.
Oh, yep. My name is Cord Stanley. I'm the General Manager of Republic Services.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.
And, you know, what Cord didn't mention, and we've also talked about, but Republic Services does donate a considerable amount of services to the city every year as well.
Thanks. No other questions?
No other questions for staff? You can step down. Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody that signed up to testify on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody present who would like to come forward and testify in this item at this time? Or is there anybody online who would like to provide testimony? You can use the raise your hand feature and we can bring you in for any comments.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
No one fighting to come up to the podium. I'm going to move that we close the public hearing on the proposed solid weight fee increase.
Second.
I have a motion, and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The public hearing is closed. So council, you'll see that back before you at our next meeting. So, okay. With that, council, next item up is item 4, public hearing for district at 10 Mile H 2023-0071.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
I mentioned when we were adopting the agenda that September 17th is a fairly lengthy meeting. Our incredible clerk was quick to point out that that is the date that that public hearing has been noticed for. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we continue the public hearing for item H 2023-0071 to September 17th.
So, Mr. Nary, do we need to open the public hearing to continue the public hearing or not?
Mr. Mayor, because it wasn't noticed properly, no, we're just going to continue to that date.
So it's moving it or versus,
Yes, it's moving it, correct.
but yeah. So just so the community doesn't, yeah, so we're going to move this to the 17th. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
I have a motion, and a second to rehear this item on, or to hear this item on the 17th. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Just real quick, I think it's important to note, we have to move this because of the noticing piece. It's not something we're choosing to do. The applicant wants to follow the law. We want the applicant to follow the law. But I would encourage council to have a light dinner, maybe bring a couple of beverages and some snacks. We could be set for a long evening.
All right. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And we will hear that item on the 17th. So next item up is item 5, which is a public hearing for Idaho State University, H 2024-0027. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Next item on the agenda is the Idaho State University annexation. Applicant is here tonight to talk about annexing 23.25 acres of land, which is currently zoned RUT and R6 in Ada County, to the CG zoning district. You can see here, I'm sure a lot of you have driven past this property over the years and said, I wonder what's going to go on this piece of property. Well, tonight we will find out. So the applicant's here to eventually develop this site with a public education institution. You can see on the future land use map that the property is commercial, so that CG zoning district does comply with that comprehensive plan designation. And right now in the aerial on the right of your screen, there are 3 existing structures that are currently on that property as well. And I'll go into some detail in my presentation what the intent is for those particular buildings remaining on the site. One thing that I'd like to share with council this evening is typically when we have these annexations, the code requires that we get a pretty detailed concept plan to show you how this would develop in the future. In our discussions with the applicant, it's become very clear that this is a multi-year project. It's something that's not going to start next year. The applicant has worked closely with staff and partnering agencies to make sure that they can or continue to work with us to develop and fine tune that plan and then come back with a plan unit development. So typically the code would require something like that, but given the nature and the complexity of this property and given the access challenges with this infill piece, we felt it best to kind of take the slow approach with the applicant and make sure we get the zoning in place allows them to access some funds where they can do some infrastructure improvements on the site as they continue to work with city staff and partnering agencies on refining that plan. And again, they will come back to us with a plan unit development and give us those details at a future date. I would share with you as well that the applicant has provided a preliminary traffic study to ACHD based on what they anticipate with some of the build out. Again, this is preliminary. I imagine some of this will be fine tuned, so I don't want to get into too many details with you tonight. But just for numbers, based on that traffic study, it looks like the project is estimated to generate 5,300 vehicle trips on an already busy arterial roadway that has only access to an arterial roadway. So keep that in mind. AM peak trips will be 552, and then PM peak trips will be 481. As part of that traffic study, there was some preliminary analysis again on accesses. So there was one access, full access proposed along Central Drive that connects into the ICOM property, which is currently a parking lot. And then two full accesses, or excuse me, one full access to Locust Grove, and then a right-in only access on Locust Grove. Again, none of this is set in stone. At least the city is encouraged that the applicant is having discussions with the Idaho State Police and with the goal of hopefully getting better access to Central, which is the collector road. We recognize that there will have to be some access to Locust Grove in the future, but having that access to Central will be critical for linking this campus with other activities on that are occurring in the area on the south side of Central Drive as well. So more to come on that, but at least for context, you can see some general layout or what you can envision on this site here moving forward. The applicant, if you had a chance to look at the staff report, you saw the new format. Hopefully you guys are liking that new format. I did raise two issues or waivers for your consideration this evening. So as I mentioned in the staff report, there are, in my presentation tonight, there are 3 structures on the site that ISU is currently using for storage. And that's all that they're using it for. Typically, we don't like residential uses to stay on a property when we give them commercial zoning, but given the nature and the timing for development to occur on the site, we felt it was prudent to allow them to continue using that so they can maintain their operations and maintain that property. So we are in agreement with that, those structures staying on the site, provided that they abandon the well and septic tank when actual development occurs on the site. So that's really the 2 asks. So keep the structures in play until development occurs and not connect the structure to water and sewer. Had a chance to talk with city engineer, and he was fine with delaying that connection until actual development occurs. So again, with any annexation, staff does recommend a development agreement between us and the property owner. So these are the 4 provisions that we are requesting you to include in the DA as part of annexation of this property. As I mentioned, number 1 deals with coming back with more refined plans and working out. And then 4 is working on the access issues, complying with code. And then the other 2 speak to maintaining the property in an orderly manner so it doesn't become a nuisance, and then also abandoning the well and septic system. We had our coordination meeting with the applicant on Friday, and we are probably going to ask council to modify number 2. Want to make it a little bit clear that the well and septic would be abandoned with future development, not necessarily upon annexation. So if you can just include that in your motion, or at least get some more, I think the applicant's going to provide to you some more information on their timing on that issue too. So just want to at least put that on your radar for tonight as you get ready to close the public hearing and deliberate on that. I just want to make sure that number 2 is clear, that the abandonment of the well and the septic system will occur with future development when the structures are removed. I've had a chance to look at the public record, have not seen any additional public comment on this application. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval at their hearing on the 15th. Testifying was Brian Sagendorf, and no one testifying in opposition or commenting other than the applicant. I did present the application, and again, no public testimony was presented at that. And as I mentioned to you, the only 2 outstanding issues I shared with you tonight were keeping the structures on the site and delaying the abandonment of the well and the septic system until future development. With that, the application is pretty straightforward, so I'll go ahead and conclude my presentation and stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bill. Council, any questions for staff? All right, would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, everybody. Mayor Simpson, President Kavanagh, thank you for the opportunity to be here before City Council. I'm Brian Sagendorf, Vice President for Campus Operations at Idaho State University, also joined by Dr. Gabe Bergen, our Dean and also Executive Director of the campus here in Meridian, and Marty Viscara, our project manager that's been working very closely with staff. It's been a great experience working with staff through the summer as we've been moving forward on this project. It's really a privilege for us to be here to talk about this very important early step for the expansion and the development of the ISU Meridian Health Science Center. We know this is a very early preliminary step and we have a long journey ahead, but clearing this annexation and rezoning application will be the start of what we envision as an incredibly important future for Idaho State University in developing student housing on the property, clinic space for residents of the community to receive treatment at, and really making this the home of health science, research, innovation, and education for the state of Idaho. Clearly, after tonight, if this application is approved, really the next steps are where the real heavy lifting begins. And we are committed to working with our partners and neighbors to making the right planning steps long-term. You may see in the annexation application that we have letters of support from the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine and also Idaho State Police who want to help us find the right solutions. And we do recognize there are plenty of questions about the entry points and exit points from the campus. And we will make sure that all parties are around the table making those decisions and planning together for a mutually beneficial outcome that will be great for the city of Meridian. And with that, I would love to stand for any questions that we could answer for council.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Brian, thanks for being here. I love that we get to say we've got a university in Meridian and we appreciate your ongoing partnership. My wife would kill me for saying this, but she's a proud Bengal, and so Adrian, go Bengals. My son is attending ISU as a student at Renaissance, so we have great appreciation for the university. My only question is, and I don't know how to answer this, all the appreciation and love that I have for this, my struggle is with Locust Grove.
Yeah.
Not a problem that you caused, but certainly one that will be accelerated if this project achieves what your vision is. How do I overcome my concerns about that?
Mayor Simpson, President Kavanagh, thank you for that question. And we do recognize that is the million-dollar question as this planning effort goes forward. And we have been at the table already having some very early discussions with the Idaho State Police. And we know, although we don't have the answer to that tonight, what we do know is that the answer is going to be along Central. We know we have to add some access points coming off of Central Drive that will connect the campus also down to our access to the campus, to our existing campus and the school district. Where that will come in that Idaho State Police property, we're going to be committed to find that with Idaho State Police, and our president, President Wagner, has also been meeting with the governor's office, and I know the state has a very vested interest in making sure that we find that solution with a lot of collaboration from the city and all those parties. So I wish I had the exact answer tonight, but I know as we come forward with the next stages of planned unit development applications, we will have those plans for the city and for your review and consideration.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
One question, one comment. I'll go with the question as kind of a follow-up on what President Kavanagh just said. I live right off Locust Grove, right across the street. I I think this is a great opportunity to come to our city. But I have a lot of concerns about Locust Grove. With how it is today, are you comfortable with a request from this council if we said that we must have a secondary access off of Central much further to the west to help alleviate people trying to have full access on Locust Grove, which is a challenge today, let alone what it's going to be in 10, 20, or 30 years?
Mayor Simpson, Councilmember Overton, yes, we would be comfortable with that as a provision of the approval, that an access point needs to be there along Central further to the west. And that is the solution that we are going to find with our neighbors and the sister state agency and Idaho State Police.
Mr. Mayor, second question.
Councilman Overton.
I spent quite a bit of time on the phone today with ACHD after I read their report. They did a fantastic job writing their traffic study, but it was very, very limited. And where I live was just outside of what they looked at, which is Woodbridge Drive and the subdivision that is the only east-west connection off of Locust Grove unless you go all the way to Overland or all the way to Franklin. That would be significantly impacted by this. I put it on their radar that they need to start bringing that as part of this application. That needs to be within their focus of what has to be done as this comes to fruition, because that's a tremendously high number of vehicle trips a day for a subdivision that already sees a tremendous amount of cut-through traffic today. They say they're going to do that. I want that on the record, so as we go forward, we understand that it's going to have impacts beyond just Locust Grove and Central. And we want to make sure, to be the best we can as a city, that we've addressed all of those concerns, even though in 30 years, this council is going to look completely different. Third thing, real quick comment. I'm a lifetime BSU Bronco alumni, and I just have to admit, I think it'd be great to have a higher presence from Idaho State University in our city.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Whitlock.
Mr. Mayor, Brian, if memory serves me correctly, I think the state legislature has already taken steps to provide an appropriation and funding for the initial infrastructure and the first steps of this program or project. Is that correct? And are you on a particular timeline or schedule for when you need to expend those funds?
Mayor Simpson, Councilmember Whitlock, thank you for that question. And yes, we did receive capital funds from the Permanent Building Fund this past year for infrastructure development of the property. We aren't on a tight timeline for expending those funds, other than the fact that we recognize that those funds are more valuable today than they will be perhaps 2, 3, 4 years from now. But assuming, if this council approves the annexation and rezoning, our next step would be to begin working with professional design and going through extensive planning discussions with our sister state agency, Idaho State Police, with the city Meridian and ICOM, so that we can factor in the appropriate access points and utilize the capital resources that we do have set aside and ready to invest in this property once we answer the very important questions on access.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, just a comment. I appreciate the significant give on your part in potentially agreeing to have some type of an access to be determined off of Central. I think that goes a long way for me in trying to wrap my head around it. Would be really excited to have this expansion here. I think it's fantastic for the whole Treasure Valley. So I want to compliment you on your plans. Certainly a lot of details to be worked out in the PUD process. But I feel like everyone's going to maybe take a little bit of a leap on this one. But I think I could probably get there on it. Thanks.
And I'll just add, I think, that this is one of those you do have to take a leap because you got to look at what the true outcome will be. And I think ultimately, right in, right outs only on Locust Grove is what's going to work and function well for everybody. and a full access that lines up with Renaissance. I mean, we're just gonna say what needs to be. I mean, the Renaissance intersection is already a challenge that needs to be addressed. This type of adjacent use will help solve that. And I do feel like there are willing partners nearby that can be there. And I think when that happens, it's also going to give you an opportunity for different full design of this property. Because you can't just like put a road through it and, there's going to be more property that's going to be adjacent to your side or more. So I know that we'll even see maybe a different version of this long-term. I know that you guys are thinking about that, but so it is a little bit of a visioning process with where we are today to get things moving in the right direction. But it's also, I think, important to note the challenges. So, the state hears it and the state understands. We want to be supportive of ISU. We want to be supportive of the out-of-state police, but there's really a need here to have a higher and better, best use and connection because, you won't get students there. You won't get business investment. You won't get people come to your clinics if you can't get in and out safely. And we know that that will make a more successful project for everybody long-term. So I see the vision. I'm excited for it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, we have anybody sign up to provide testimony?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony on this item, either in the room or online? If you're online, use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand online, would you like to make any final comments or do you waive? Applicant waives. Any final comments? Council, up to you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
move that we close the public hearing on item 5.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
after hearing all staff, applicant, and unfortunately tonight, no public comments, I do move to approve file number H 2024-0027 as presented in the staff report for today's hearing date with the following modifications, clarifying that the city council will grant the 2 waivers of the 3 existing structures not to connect to city utilities at this time, and the ability for the applicant to continue to use the 3 existing structures for storage, adding the proposed DA provisions 1 through 4 with the modification under provision number 2 that the well and septic will be abandoned with future development. And furthermore, adding an additional condition that that in the future, the applicant needs to demonstrate an access off of Central.
Second.
That's it.
Have a motion, a second. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts, Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Midlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you at the next step. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 6, which is a public hearing continued from August 13th, 2024 for UDC text amendment. Mr. Parsons, any further comments to add?
No, sir. Oh, you mean on the UDC text amendment?
Yeah,
Sorry.
on that next one.
Just to recap what mayor, members of the council, just to recap what was discussed at the last meeting. And I just want to actually extend my appreciation to Council President Cavanagh, because I really do appreciate the fact that you want to take your time and review these code changes, because as you know, it's not that they can't be changed, but we want to make sure we're doing it right and getting it right. So anytime you guys feel like you need more time to analyze or do something, feel free to do it. I think I commend you to do that. I applaud you for doing that because I do think it's important. But at the same time, I want you to know that we try to fully vet these as we bring them to you as well. So I think tonight, the previous work session was a good example of how we can improve it moving forward. And that way, when we get to final deliberation, we'll know we have it right and we'll make sure that we have a good code going forward. So I do appreciate that, Council President Kavner. Let me go ahead and share my code changes here and just kind of go over what I heard last time from the group. I don't think there were really a lot of significant changes that I heard from you, or at least things for me to contemplate. But just things that I just want to prod the council's memory to see if there's any further discussion around certain topics. So I know, at least on page 1, we spent some time talking about bedroom definitions and why we were adding that to the code. 2, you spent some time on, I don't know, drive-throughs, if we were going to define the difference between the various drive-through types, and that is difficult. But what I can tell you is after that hearing, I actually had one of our applicants reach out and say, I do drive-throughs all throughout the country, and I'd love to sit down and talk to you about them. And so I was able to meet with that gentleman, and he was able to help educate me, or at least say, hey, these are things that work well in other communities of what I've seen. And so I also invited him to be part of the UDC focus group. I said, please bring that knowledge to our team and you could share it with the rest of us. So really no significant changes, but he did give me a lot of things to contemplate. So no real substantive changes to the drive-through changes, but I just want you to know that I think what I have tonight meets a lot of what they're doing nationally. So I wasn't too far off on that. But what he and I talked about is certain codes out there also require certain stacking between a menu window, or excuse me, the pickup window and the menu board. And then you have stacking requirements from the menu to where you enter the drive-through. So very, very interesting discussion to look at a drive-through from that way, that vantage point, because now you're actually defining how many vehicles you can fit in a stacking lane. So in this example that he shared with me, I'll just kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. This particular code that I saw exhibit in the code was they had the ordering window, and then their code said a minimum of 6 vehicles had to stack between the pickup window and the menu board. So there's 6 vehicles, and then the menu board and where you ordered or entered the drive-through had a minimum of 4 cars. So in that particular scenario, the minimum cars that they had to allow for stacking was 10. Our code's somewhat similar. We said 5 for each per lane. So for restaurants or coffee shops, and then for banks, it was 2. Something that was, or dry cleaning, something that you get in and out, or you order on an app and you just have to drive through and pick it up and you get cars in and out pretty quickly. You'll probably do a little less. So anyways, I wanted to share with you that I did have that conversation. We talked about the food courts and whether or not 2 parking stalls was appropriate or require any parking. I believe the mayor had some commentary too. If we're going to treat it like a commercial business, and we should require the same things of what we do for our brick and mortar stores, which I think was probably a pretty valuable comment. And then Councilwoman Strader asked me to look at home ocs, and I said I didn't think I had the opportunity to do that, but I did put some pen to paper and had some of those if we get to that. And then also I had a chance to meet with one of our developers, UDC focus group members, to talk about the mitigation along state highways and how to go about that. And I think I had a very good discussion. I think it was a very valuable discussion. But ultimately, I felt the way the code was drafted and the fact that they're not thou shalls, it's really more to inspire what someone can do rather than require. That I think what we have on the books is pretty dialed in. For some examples, again, this is meant to spur the conversation, not necessarily require it. Then I had the opportunity to share with some of that literature with Councilwoman Strader. So again, those are kind of the 4 or 5 points that I recall from that discussion, but certainly if you've had a chance to read through the code, or you want me to dive into any of the specific pages or details, happy to stand for any additional questions council or mayor may have.
A quick question, because it's like, under the new definition for bedroom provides 1 means of egress. Is that, why not 2 mean? I was always window, door. Am I not understanding, or are we saying you only have to have a door?
Mayor, members of the council, that is, I'm not a building code expert, but that is, it aligns with the building code definition. But typically in my discussions with the building department, there's a certain size window you have to have for ingress, egress for a bedroom too. So I think that's what that relates to, but I can certainly get clarification on it.
Yeah, just that it's, the door doesn't count as the one, because otherwise my closet just became a bedroom in my house.
Yeah, exactly. It really is meant, I believe it's meant to be a window access, ingress, egress.
Anybody in our audience know if egress is defined as a window? Okay, I have a nodding head from a building of, I can't call you a building official because a member of the development community, that a egress is defined as, just so we're clear. I just want to make sure that's what that is referring to. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I think just from some Googling, and granted that that may not be what definition we're using elsewhere, but it's a means of going out.
Right.
It's not specific to how.
Council, any questions for staff right now?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Caver.
just one, because I'm trying to kind of track my notes, and apologies, I can't get the minutes to pull up. Bill, if I recall that you were going to take some of these back to the UDC focus group, but I didn't hear that as part of your summary.
Mayor, members of the council, I did not do that.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Caver.
Bill, do I just have a mismemory then? Was something I thought that we were going to do? And am I just not recalling it the right way?
Mayor, members of the council, I'm with you. My recollection wasn't that I should go back to do that. And that's why my presentation to you is I heard the discussion, but there wasn't really anything to change, but you guys wanted more time to look things over. And then I had communicated that I would get with with one of our UDC focus group members to discuss the mitigation along state highways.
Right, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Caver.
Was that an individual builder? Was that a member of the BCA? I mean, those are big changes. And so I worry if we're just talking to one individual, we're getting maybe a subjective perspective where, again, the focus group or the BCA is designed to kind of give some industry expertise feedback. And I would hope that something maybe we would want to solicit.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council. So the one person that I did meet with was the one that brought that concern to you, and the representation from BCA. So hopefully if he wants to testify, you can certainly ask him to come up and provide comments on our discussion.
Okay.
And his feedback.
Okay. Well, with that, do we have anybody from the public that would like to provide testimony on these items? I don't know if you'd like to come forward, Lauren.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman. Again, my name is Laren Bailey. My work address is 4824 West Fairview Avenue, Boise, Idaho. And yeah, I did testify before last month, and we talked about, holding some of this over. Bill and I did have a discussion. I guess there's a little bit of frustration on our part that I don't think any of the points we're bringing up are being heard. And partly the reason why we're so focused on this is we've really looked at, well, what properties does this one ordinance focus on? And I'm talking about the highway buffering, UDC code 11-3H-1. So we looked at throughout Meridian, we looked at the freeway, the new Highway 16, we looked at everywhere. There's only one property that this is going to affect. Only one property that has an elevated situation with an overpass at McMillan and Highway 16, and it happens to be our property. So that's why we're concerned about it. And I know normally we wouldn't change something for one parcel, and you wouldn't change a code just because it affects one parcel, but we're making a code that's only going to affect one parcel. So I find that kind of odd to start with. And we're not really an objection to the code itself. I think parts of it are good and make sense. And that's why we actually brought this up to begin with 2 years ago. We tried to get some verbiage in here because we knew that the current code wasn't going to work, and we're going to have to figure out how to satisfy the current code. And what the issue comes down to is, if you can visualize with me for a minute, I know this is going to be, might take a minute to understand, but at Highway 16 and McMillan Road, you've got an overpass. So the highway is going to go over McMillan. There's not going to be an interchange, so no on or off ramps. Highway's just going over McMillan Road. The current code says you have to build a berm/wall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, if it's 10 or 12 feet, I don't remember exactly. It's 10 or 12 feet above the center line of the roadway. So when you've got the highway, you know, before it starts to elevate, when it's just flat level with the ground, you might have it a couple feet above existing grade. So we've got to build a wall and berm that's 10 to 12 feet tall. And that makes sense. That's what's been done on Chinden. That's been done, what's been done in other areas and other parts of Highway 16. The problem is where you start to elevate over McMillan Road, you get 20 to 25 feet in the air. Well, we can't build a 35-foot wall to block noise and sound, you know, sound and things. So there needs to be some sort of back and forth. It's only a portion of the property. It's not like it's the whole property affected. It's not like it's this big, huge deal. What staff has proposed is alternative compliance for that, which is fine, except they've added some pieces of that. They want some air quality studies and some sound studies. Well, one, there's no requirements what passes, what doesn't, what are we shooting for, what are we aiming for to meet, number one, and there's no specification on what those studies would be, how they would be conducted, who would conduct them, and then who at the city would be able to review them. So we just don't want to get in a situation where we don't have an out. We don't have a way to deal with this because nobody knows how to solve it. The second part of that is
And just for the record, can you tell me more?
okay, thank you. So I feel like, it sounds like we're whining a little bit here, and I really, that's not what we want to do, and I'm not trying to make it difficult for staff. Bill and I work on the focus group a lot, and I think we do some really good stuff, and I think it's great that we can collaborate. This is just one where I feel like we just don't have it there yet. We've said, hey, we want air quality and we want noise. Okay, but what? And where do we go with it? And how do we know when we've met it or we don't meet it? That's my concern. We're just trying to get to the bottom of is how is that gauged and what are the parameters? With that, yeah, I would have liked to see it go back to the focus group because I think there's other individuals that had comments and we did talk about it several times, and I don't think any of those comments really made it to the end product. I also felt like a lot was added to this section of the code after the focus group saw it. So with that, again, I feel like it's one parcel. It's not like this is gonna affect the whole city, whether you pass it tonight or don't pass it tonight. Now, if you move forward with it, can we figure it out? I hope so. But like I said, I just don't know what the parameters are. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. And you may, at some point in time, I assume if you get high enough that the noise goes away even.
Yeah.
Is that true? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just, there's.
So what I've read and looked at, and I even passed some diagrams to Bill. So what happens is on that asphalt roadway, your sound goes down from the car, it hits the asphalt, and then it goes up and I don't know what angle, 30-degree angle roughly. It goes up and out. So anything below that, you don't really hear a lot of the noise. So as you rise up, yeah, once you get above that wall, it's going up at such a rate that it's not impacting people like it would if you were standing right next to it. It diminishes pretty quickly. The other way to deal with sound, obviously, is that berm and that wall. That's the best way to deal with sound. But at some point, you just can't build a wall tall enough to block everything. It's just not possible.
And that goes back to, but you're not blocking anything potentially.
Correct.
With that. I mean, I can't think of a place where, and I'm not knowing what you would propose, that where I'm just trying to visualize, where have I seen an overpass with single-family residential right next to it? Oh, we are gonna, but we're gonna create that a little bit around Locust Grove. Or I'm sorry, Linder, they're gonna be coming right across, not at the same speed limit. Is it the speed limit? Or is it the roadway and under our code that this would apply?
Mayor, members of the council, it's the road typology. So in that case, Linder is not a state highway. It's, or a federal highway. So that code would not apply.
So I thought about that because I thought, well, where can I give an example of? And actually, if you can visualize Broadway Avenue in Boise, Broadway hits the freeway, you've got residential on the north side of the road. And the wall is there, but as Broadway comes up and goes over, the wall doesn't get taller. The wall stays the same height. So at some point, you do have an overpass, you got the freeway higher than that wall. There's also in Nampa, there's a similar situation, but it's not quite the same. So I'm not going to go into the whole trying to describe that one to you. But it is rare that the freeway goes over another roadway. It usually is that the other roadway, the smaller roadway, goes over the freeway or the highway. So that's again why this is not, we're not going to see this a whole bunch more times. I mean, if the state builds another highway than Highway 16, and I don't know when that's going to be, but I doubt it's when any of us are still in this room, the way things get funded. I just don't see it as being, a big issue that's going to happen again, that it's going to be in the code and get used one time.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Looking at the proposed language here, so if you're not able to build the wall, which that clearly doesn't make sense, then we go down to section 4. Director may approve alternative compliance as set forth in chapter 5 of this title, where the applicant has substitute noise abatement proposal in accord with ITD standards and prepared by a qualified sound engineer. What are those standards, and is it our responsibility to ensure you're in compliance with their standard? And maybe a question for both Bill and Laren. I'm trying to understand how that works because it's ITD standards, RUDC. So if they can't build the wall high enough, because that does make sense. You're not going to build a 35-foot wall. So help me understand how we would enforce that, if we can.
You going first?
I can go first, Larry. I'm happy to. So Mayor, Council Member Taylor, it's my research of this topic is it's ITD kind of defers to the feds, and then the feds go to the, and then you go to the
You're not
feds
helping your
regulation,
case.
and then they give you a whole bunch of other ways how you can do it. That's why it's a complicated topic, and that's what Larry and I keep going back and forth on. It's like we both agree to say, we know it's a silly ordinance. It's not silly, but what I mean is it's impractical to try to combat noise when you have an elevated roadway. That's the difficulty. But how do you do that? And then, like you said, like Laren says, we trust the applicant to give us that documentation, and it's stamped and certified by a professional, and that's what we take. We're not sound engineers. We're not technical engineers to do that. Just same with the air quality. I mean, in bigger cities, they have very sophisticated air quality monitoring systems. They have GIS. They can do all this modeling and let you know where all the problems and issues are. I mean, that's really how the world works in these bigger metropolitans. This is just an opportunity for staff to say, hey, the UDC focus group brought this to our attention. The only means we have in code, we don't have a sophisticated process to analyze all of these things. All we have is code and alternative compliance to say, hey, this is one way to get there. It's not the only way. And that gets it's really meant to be flexible, but I definitely understand the position that you're hearing tonight is like, who's to say what is going to work and what isn't going to work? The perfect scenario is you don't build residential next to a state highway. That's the easy solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, but a lot of times when you go to other communities, the roadway is actually built in the ground. The residential can be elevated, so you can reverse that too. So again, there's many ways to try to tackle this, but unfortunately, what Laren is describing is this is the one piece of property that is faced with this situation, and the only code we have to combat it is alternative compliance, which won't really mitigate anything. Noise is still gonna travel over top of the subdivision and go down to the next property owner. It's just gonna travel.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
just
sir.
a quick follow-up question then. So if we're involving the Fed's standards, do we run into a situation where we can't move forward with this development because we can't meet these standards?
Mayor, members of the council, not necessarily. Certainly, we'll reach out to them and get their input on it. But again, ITD is going to say, we're building the road to the Fed standards. We're doing what our permit says. We've done the TIS or the environmental impact statement. We've got buy-in and we've got the federal dollars to build it. So again, they're looking at it. If there was something already there, absolutely. If those homes that were there today, they would be mitigating per those standards, whatever the study said to do. But we have an opportunity where it's vacant ground, and so now it falls on us to say, how do we want to mitigate that?
Mr. Mayor,
Larry?
I've got a couple comments. One, you already have developments on the east side of Highway 16 that don't have a wall. They have a vinyl fence, no berm, no wall. If ITD already deemed those are acceptable and they're not doing anything, then I would assume that us building a berm and a wall should be better than that. Second, my big concern is with the federal requirements. As we know, the federal government can change the requirements at any time. So if you make a city code that says you're going to follow the federal requirement, they change it, then where are we? I think that's often a problem when we reference other jurisdictions' codes. So I think those are two issues. And then again, as Bill said, I mean, this is the one property. And I guess if we need a code for the one property, then we do, but I think we feel like it's overkill.
Just out of curiosity, not knowing where the property is, in your mind, how many lots would this impact in that one property? Based upon 2,
No,
3?
no, it's definitely going to be more than that.
'Cause
That are going to be near the interchange, the intersection, you're probably speaking about 25, 30 lots.
that will be below the,
That the
That the-
freeway would be above, yeah, that they would be above. I don't know an exact number. I haven't sat down and like drawn out exactly how high the freeway is there compared to what we're doing, where that line would be. I don't know that I can fully answer that.
Okay.
But it's not going to be 2. It's definitely going to be more like 30. The other thing I wanted to point out, Bill made another comment about not putting residential next to the highway. I guess that would be ideal, except that's what the comp plan has, and that's why we purchased the property, because it's comp plan residential.
Mr. Mayor,
that's what share.
I'm just curious for staff's perspective on timing, when the comp plan was done. Obviously, we have the timing of the expansion of the highway. Could you refresh our memories? Were we aware of that at the time that the comp plan was approved? Help me understand that. I get it, that this is something, you made a decision based on a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan might have been made without full visibility into the highway. I want to be honest, I'm struggling with the concept of potentially putting residential homes so close to this situation. I just want to understand the timing aspect.
So Mayor, members of the council, Councilwoman Strader, don't have the exact time frame, but it's always been contemplated in our ordinance and in our comprehensive plan that we had goals and policies to set aside for future right-of-way expansion or construction of State Highway 16. So I've been with the city since 2007, and that's always been in there to preserve that. That's when a lot of those studies started happening too. I remember that very well in our discussions at staff. So we've been planning for this for a long time, but keep in mind, as Laren had mentioned, ITD changed the plan. The overpasses were going to be different and oriented. They flipped on us, and now the highway was elevated instead of McMillan being elevated. And so even those projects that are on the east side of McDermott Road, we set aside extra right-of-way for the overpass, and now they're just common lots, extra wide common lots, because we thought that the toe of the overpass was going to be going into those homes. So yes, we have contemplated this for a very long time. It's been part of our comprehensive planning code to
Mr.
set
Mayor.
aside and preserve for that.
Bill.
And
One-
this section is always, it's as long as I've been with the city, this has been in our code.
One last comment. If you look at this area, you've roughly got 2 miles of Meridian, 2 miles that abut the highway, and then it kind of diverts to the west and is in Nampa's area of impact. In those 2 miles, you've already approved residential developments basically along the whole frontage of the highway. There's a couple small commercial areas, but you're already have approved residential all up and down the frontage. So we're not asking for anything extra or different or beyond what anybody else has done. Some of them have a berm and a wall and have been approved with that. Some of them don't. Obviously, we would be doing that. But with that, I know it's dragging on, so.
Mayor and council, just little more context or information. And I certainly want to continue to collaborate with Laren on this topic because I think it's very intriguing. I'm sure Councilwoman Schrader read it and said, wow, this is eye-opening. It is. It's important, but at what time do we implement something like that as a community? It does get to your heartstring because we all want to do the right thing for the community. But ultimately, I want to let this council know that every development that was on the west side of the State Highway 16, you guys had required the 6-foot berm and a 6-foot wall on top of it. So you guys were consistent in that 12 feet. Now, as they transition to the Ustick area closer to near the high school, it's not practical because of the elevated roadway that situation will be the same. But we are processing a final plat on that application, and I believe the engineer of record actually sent over plans to do a berm and a 15-foot tall wall to try to meet the requirement of the ordinance. So just kind of put in context there, like everything from anything from McMillan between Ustick, you guys were consistent on the west side as to how to mitigate that situation. And then on the other side, McDermott Road becomes the backage road. And so those properties are actually set back farther from the highway just due to the nature of the alignment of the freeway. So, but we did require some of that berming and sound attenuation, even though they weren't abutting the highway, they were adjacent to it. So we still try to hold them to that standard. I was hoping when I looked out, we go out there and do field trips to kind of see how the road work is progressing. And I drove by the school out there, and the school was supposed to have some berming and some trees there too. And I didn't quite see everything that we had envisioned or required as part of the school to put in either. But just to give you context, we tried to be consistent along that corridor where we could be, at least applying the rules that we have today.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I'm going to ask a question I think I know the answer to already, but is it at all feasible that the highway itself would contain the wall in some areas? The reason I'm asking is I was like looking over Council President Kavner's, what is this, Google Maps or something, and there was kind of an example where I think theoretically there could be a wall on the highway itself, right? Now, we don't control the entity that would do that, but is that something we've explored at all? Maybe you've explored it or we've chatted with them about it. The reason I'm asking is it's completely unfeasible. It's not economically feasible or maybe practical from a physics perspective to just build this enormous wall, right? But the highway, in theory, could contain the wall itself. Maybe. I don't know. That's why I'm kind of asking. It's a little bit of a creative maybe question, but.
So I think, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I think the answer to that is ITD did, like Bill said, they did an environmental analysis and ITD has requirements from the federal government when they build highway or for funding and all those things. And when they do that study, one of the things they look at is the sound and those things. And if it is an issue, then they build a wall like they did on the freeway, like on I-84. They didn't do that here. Now, I'm intuiting that they didn't do it because the studies didn't require it. Now, maybe the studies didn't require it because it's farmland, but they didn't do it where there's houses either. There's already homes there and they didn't do it. So at the end of this, what I'm wondering is are we chasing the tail of the tiger here? Did it already has this already been analyzed, already been done, and it was decided we didn't need a wall and we're now, I don't know. I still believe there needs to be a 12-foot berm and wall combination. I firmly believe that, and that's what we intend to build or hope to build. I just don't know how to solve this other piece.
So can I ask, is that what your recommendation was? That essentially it continues at the same height?
Yes. And to one more point, when the highway gets higher, it also, ITD has more right of way. So they bought, there's an additional, I think 50 or 56 feet of right of way at the interchange, or not interchange, but at the overpass. So there is more of a setback there. So the wall will have to jog and go around that. Will be further back from the roadway at that point. Because they needed more room to have the slope, the embankment, for that to slope down. So there is more, setback at that area.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor?
this is really odd to me that we're talking about UDC changes, but we're talking about some very specific property. Do we envision the need to make these changes because we anticipate other situations, or we're just trying to find a way to be in conformance with what we think we need to be in conformance with? Because it's almost like we're having a hearing on an application. And I don't think that's the intent here, but I think clearly we've navigated and identified that we are talking about one specific situation. So are there other scenarios that we anticipate needing this change? Or is this just our effort to kind of sort of follow the processes that are kind of imposed upon us by other entities?
Yeah, and could this be a variance process if this was in the code some way?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, that's what alternative compliance is. It's essentially staff level
Right.
variance, but that's the avenue that we feel is the best way to get to where we need to be, because there's nothing else. Like I said, like you said, we're debating this. We all know there's ways to solve it, but I'm trying to think, at least when we had gone through our map, there wasn't that many properties left along kind of the state highways, because we don't require that requirement for commercial or industrial properties. It really is when it's hospitals, schools, churches, residential uses where we require the berming and the sound attenuation.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor?
Maybe a question for legal. If we grant alternative compliance in a situation like this, can another entity come in and say, no, you can't?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no. It definitely is a land use decision that the city would be able to make.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock?
Aaron, did I hear you say earlier there were some suggestions that you had that didn't make it into this draft? And if so, do you have language that you'd like us to look at?
I didn't bring specific language. I did go through, Bill, the portions that I thought needed to be resolved or changed. I think there's a few other things that I just think they're weird, to be honest with you. One of them is that when we build this berm and wall, it can only be every 300 feet, it either has to have a jog in it or we've got to change the color of the material. And I have pictures. I didn't bring them. I didn't want to get into all that because I think it's not that big a deal. But there's a place on Meridian Road that I think everybody's aware of that's south of Victory, where the fence is gray for 300 feet and then it turns brown for 300 feet or wall. And everybody I know points it out and goes, that is so weird. Why did they do that? And those are things that I'm weird and I focus on. So I'm not getting into all that. That's one issue. The other issue is just the air quality and noise study. If we're looking at a federal highway, I mean, it's an in-depth process. It's a year-long thing to study the air quality. It doesn't just happen overnight. You don't go out once and sample it. you've got to do it over a period of time. The highway's not built yet. It's not at its full build out either. It's going to continue to get built over the next 5 to 10 years. So I don't know how we resolve it in the time frame of we submit a project. I'm hoping to submit to you in the next month. I don't know how to resolve it in that time frame. I mean, that's the bigger issue for me is I don't even know. I can go out there and study it today if you like, farm field with no cars driving by. I'd be more than happy to. But I don't know that we get the answer. So then what do we do? Then I'm back here in front of you. We're having a hearing. Staff doesn't like our project because they don't think we have an answer to it. Noise and air quality. So now we're having this discussion again. I don't know. That's what I was trying to head off at the pass. I thought we were doing the right thing with the focus group. I thought we were getting on the page and we didn't. And so I'm here.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman
And
Cavan.
I think that was maybe my question that started this whole thing. When you met with staff, you were not representing BCA, or I don't know if you're on the UDC focus group, so I don't know if you're.
So I am on the focus group. I did bring this item up at the BCA and we had a discussion about it last month before the other hearing. They had a small vote of the developers group. So I'm not representing the whole BCA, but the developers group said, yeah, we agree. This is nebulous and we need some more definition here. Okay. It's okay to represent that at the hearing.
I appreciate that.
Council, any additional questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who's present who would like to provide testimony on this item? Councilman Cavan, you have a desire?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I do, but I think there's a couple that I think is important maybe for council to at least deliberate on. I have three. I'm largely supportive of what is presented with, I think there's three that I think are worth holding out for either further collaboration, either that is staff-led or maybe a larger council discussion. The first one I think is the one that was just been referenced, 11.3H1. The second one is 11.4.3.11, I think, if my chicken scratch is correct, and that's one related to drive-throughs. Bill, your engagement with an expert is really encouraging. I think that I know I kind of threw this out there last time, but I do think that we've got to take a larger look at drive-throughs. And since this last one, the council deliberated over a drive-through request. That was, a much different thing than maybe we had initially anticipated. There was a lot of deliberation, discussion about that. Your comments about window order versus pickup wouldn't pertain in that particular area, right? It wouldn't pertain at my local bank. So I think to your point, we like to get this right. We don't want to come back and kind of fix it. So I think that's the other one that I would like to hold. The other one that I would maybe like some deliberation or some discussion from council on is 11.5A.6.4, which is about sign affidavits. Everything you've proposed makes sense, but in our last meeting, we had talked about, and I don't know, maybe I wasn't clear about it, if adding a QR code to the signs makes sense. And if that's the part of UDC that we would need to capture that, or if that's something else. And so I'm not saying you've got to hold this one, but I just was more curious. That was something we deliberated. Sounded like a couple council members were supportive of that. I didn't see anything reflected or anything updated on that. So either Bill, if you've got an update for us, or if there's some discussion for council about that particular one.
Mayor, members of the council, I don't. I like that suggestion, but at the same time, part of me says, why do we want to distract people more? Are you gonna get your phone on there, or you sit at a light? Shouldn't be on your phone in your car trying to shoot these signs. So, although I like that concept, is it doable? Potentially. Again, as far as the sort of certificate of signposting, this is one that was brought to us years ago. I think Laren brought that. So essentially it goes back to our discussion at workshop about an affidavit of legal interest from the business owner to erect a sign. Same thing here. Our code requires that same affidavit, so that they have to go post the site and then take this form, get it notarized, and send it saying that they posted the site. So all we're trying to do is simplify the process. But as far as QR code, I guess maybe from my standpoint, how do you see it? How do you envision it working? Someone pulling off and walking up to the sign and shooting it, or riding their bike and shooting this code?
Mr.
Because a
Mayor.
lot of times they're perpendicular to the street for the code. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding, because there's only limited space they can fit on that sign too. So just,
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think, Bill, I think that was why I thought taking some of these things back to the UDC focus group would be beneficial. This was a somewhat of a flippant comment that came from me based on conversations at National Night Out. Your feedback on there, certainly if somebody's driving down Shinden Road, we don't want them hanging their phone out, snapping a photo. But after we had an application before us last week or a couple weeks ago, I was in that vicinity and I went to go look at the sign for that specific reason. Now on that, it was adjacent to a parking lot from a retailer I go to. So I parked my car, I walked over, looked at the sign, thought, okay, where does that make sense? Maybe the lower right, upper left. But I think there are some places where it will be really beneficial. And there's some places that its location may be somewhat problematic. And I think what I had wanted to hear is from those who do this on a regular basis, how do we improve our ability to communicate with the public about what's going on there? What makes sense in terms of size, location, et cetera. So like I said, I'm not so beholden that we've got to hold this one, but I think that was at least some of my thought as to, you brought some of this back to us, you got some feedback. That's why we've got the focus group. Let's share it with them. And then you could come back with a summary of feedback, trust your feedback from them, and then we could use that as another basis to help us render a decision.
Yeah, and I think there's some basic questions in that you could have that conversation. QR code to where and when? Because what's being provided to the person making the sign, do you even have does it just go to a general one place on our website where as compared to an application file location? You know, those are some very basic, not knowing when people try to post signs, but that could be the dialogue to say what makes sense or doesn't make sense, or in that conversation.
Mr. Mayor, Council, those were the three that I still think maybe need a little bit of massage.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I don't feel as strongly on all three. I definitely have some concerns on the drive-throughs. I know he's found somebody that knows a lot about it, but I'd sure like to see that go through the full focus group and have a lot more heads involved.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
I think we're going to benefit from kicking things back to the UDC focus group, but I don't see any downside to doing that. So, you know, even though I don't have a ton of energy around the QR codes, I think it could be beneficial depending on how they're used. I mean, but they're kind of involved. Like you have to generate a QR code, you know, you need a subscription to pay for that. QR codes are going to be specific to each sign in terms of how QR codes work. Like we don't just own a general QR code. It's like every QR code, sorry, I'm losing my voice, but is going to end up being associated with a specific sign. And so I think from a technical standpoint, that's kind of an involved thing to try to take on. I don't have any issue though, kicking these three back to the UDC focus group for discussion. I think that would only benefit us. I don't think we need to, the highway one is very involved. I think getting more feedback on that couldn't hurt.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
so Mayor, sorry,
Please.
Council, did you want to look at any of the home occupation changes before you to potentially add to this list? So I guess my recommendation for the council tonight is, if those three you want, keep in mind that two of those were vetted very thoroughly with the UDC focus group, and they did like those changes, the drive-throughs and the certificate of sign posting. But that, I'm happy to take that back and get some more, have some more conversations around the QR code for you. But if you do want to remove those, then I just ask that your motion, we'll hold them out and bring them back and with another code change, and I'll reopen them up with the focus group and talk about those and then move forward with some of these other changes. But I also wanted to share with you some of those home occupations standards, if you want to look at that before you deliberate a little bit more on that. I know we didn't have a chance to have public comment on that particular section, but I'll turn to Mr. Neri to see if he thinks we should open that up if we're going to look at the home occup standards as well.
And one other quick thing just before we go there. So Councilman Cameron, do you have any issue with the current language by going away from the notary? It would be okay to move that forward and then should them evaluate the rest of it?
Mr. Mayor, exceptional question. And yeah, the short answer is yes. I don't have any issue with the language that is currently presented. I just didn't know if it was cleaner to, if it's back as one piece or if it's a future update. I'm not, it doesn't matter to me on either of those. I'm certainly supportive of including 115864 in the totality with the request to have staff work with UDC. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I want to make sure Bill and I are saying the same thing. When it comes to 114311, I'm not quite sure right now that going back to the UDC focus group to say, take another look at this makes sense. What I actually think is taking some of the feedback from Councilmember Overton, myself, some subject matter experts. I believe we had somebody here testifying about that. And let's have a broader conversation about what drive-throughs are and aren't in Meridian, where and where they're not appropriate. Is drive-through style X okay in one use and drive-through Y not? Again, I come back to a couple weeks ago, we deliberated about a drive-through for a bank, but we were not supportive of a drive-through for a quick service restaurant. To me, that Councilmember Overton's commentary about that could totally encapsulate the reason we've got to think a little bit bigger when it comes to drive-throughs in Meridian. So I think it's more of a larger conversation first, or as you're working through that, maybe with your council liaison, and then take that piece back to the UDC focus group, not just simply saying, hey, what was presented here, council wasn't supportive, they want something else.
Moving forward with the change to, so we can at least get I think that's why our other hearing was not able to go tonight, was because it didn't have a legal, so it would help solve some of those simple things to keep that moving forward and the others.
So, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that I made a motion quite yet to close the public hearing. So I think if Mr. Parsons wants to continue on the home occupations, that seems appropriate.
Okay.
Perfect. Let me pull it up and show you what I drafted up. And I would share with the mayor and council that this was also shared with legal and code enforcement. And I apologize, it's not in the same format that you'd see in the table, so I just did a quick word version of it for you so you can look at it. So it's really 3 sections added. So I think everyone was aware of the topic that was brought up a couple of weeks ago. So you can see here, we added outdoor swim lessons. Let me see if I can make this bigger here. Being finicky here. So it's essentially, talking with code, and they were fine with allowing up to 3 persons at one time. So again, it's something that I came up with thinking too, maybe less noise for the neighbors. So I'm thinking of kind of the long picture, everybody that is surrounded by these types of use. So again, allowing just that particular outdoor activity as part of a home occ, and then clarifying in a further section that where it says it should be entirely in the dwelling, we're exempting swim lessons from that standard. And then also adding an I that says that they could operate between certain times of the year, from certain months and terminating by a certain date. So that's kind of what we roundtabled and shared with the group, but I'm just happy for feedback. If you like it, don't like it, we can certainly continue to vet that and discuss that as well. But
Question, is the word outdoor required? Why not just swim lessons? What if they have an indoor pool? Would that be okay in the property?
Indoor might work depending on how much.
Well, I'm just saying, what's the value of adding the word outdoor generally in this concept?
Mr. Mayor, we already have lessons for indoor that's up to 7 people. So they can have up to 7 students if it was indoor. So we have dance studios and music studios that are approved, and indoors, they're allowed to have more. So just by signifying that there'd be outdoor would just restrict it to keep the noise levels down.
Mr. Mayor.
Which one was that? Councilman Cavanagh?
Oh, thanks,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. So, Bill Lacy, I went through it at a little bit of a rapid speed, so kind of track it as we were going through this with you. I think the only thing that stands out to me is limiting it to 2. And this is, it sounds like this has come more from a quality of life standpoint. Parks are loud, people survive. Out daycares let kids play out in the backyard. We don't limit that to 2. If we say, I assume 7 is probably more based on a life safety element. So the only change that I would look to is to change the number from 2 to 7.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I agree with that comment. I think 2 is very restrictive. I think this is very constructive, and I want to compliment you for taking this on, because I know this was not an easy topic to try to take on. And again, it's kind of a balance. I think I would be more in the 5 to 7 camp in terms of the number of persons, but I do think it would be good to have this in another public hearing to get some more feedback, because it's pretty new. We've been doing a couple of public hearings on these other topics. I think it would be appropriate to have this in a public hearing, a future public hearing, and try to get feedback. And then we could alert people that we do know are affected or not affected by this, so we could hear from them. I think that would be a good thing. And I really want to compliment you for taking this on. Thank you.
Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
just a question on outdoor swim lessons for up to and then a specified number. Do we need to put some parameters around a time frame? I mean, can you look at this and say 2 lessons per day, 2 lessons per hour? I mean, what's the time frame that we need to include here?
Yeah, mayor, members of the council, it would be 2 persons at any one time. And then we also talked about, for example, the in-home daycares are 6 or fewer. So we also thought about aligning that with this section of the code. So it's kind of similar language, but certainly if we bring it back, I'm hearing what you guys, the commentary that council's giving me, so I can certainly take those notes and then kind of massage that as we come forward with the draft changes that you guys want to open up for public comments.
In addition, if 7 was a number and it aligns with indoor, then you just go change that portion of the code that just says, rather than having an indoor and an outdoor in 2 different areas with 7, you say swim lessons for up to 7. Would that be how you'd want to apply it? And I don't know where the indoor is, where it lives, but that would seem kind of weird to have an indoor and outdoor in 2 different parts of code if the same number was the issue.
Mayor, members of the council, this is the same code that applies to 7, or it's all the same code. It's just in our application of things, we say that it's in the, because you see it right here, 7 or more. So again, you could just say that, and be silent on the number of persons. So, but it says 7 or more. That's where, if we will go to that route, we would change that and say 7 or fewer. And then we'd have to change other sections in code to align with that, but that's one way of doing it as well. You could, again, that's how you can. So again, this is my kind of first chance opportunity to kind of get some ideas on paper and then share it with all of you. And I do appreciate the feedback. I think there's ways we can do it and tweak it a little bit.
Did I misunderstood? Indoor lessons are 7 or less?
No, 7 or more. So, but I said if council wanted to align with 7 or more or 7 or fewer, then we would have to change that section clearer below that the outdoor swim lessons would have a different.
Could I redirect some of the differences between the daycare issue and home as lessons? So for us, the difference that we see and the reason that we receive complaints, especially in situations of lessons, is when drop off and pickup is at the same time. Whereas a daycare, usually they come in and come out at staggered times. And usually you're going to have parents that will idle in their cars for the duration of the lesson, as opposed to just leaving. And so our complaints come in from parking issues, blocking mailboxes, blocking driveways, and then the noise ordinance, the noise issues in the back. Whereas at daycare may let the kids out for playtime, or I really don't know of a daycare we have permitted that has a pool, because they would be restricted for their pool access. But if they did, let's say they played in the pool, they'd be out there for a half an hour, and they'd come in for a snack, whereas the lessons could go from 1 hour to the next hour, and then you can consistently have different groups and parents out idling. So that's why trying to restrict the number, making it less, would keep less cars and people involved, and the noise levels down that are exposed. Obviously outdoors, whereas indoors, they're going to be confined. So that's some of the reasons that we're trying to lower that number. It's the consistency that they would be doing lessons during those time periods. So we do have operation hours for home occupations, which is extensive. I think it's like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or something. So currently it would just operate under the same hours allowed for operations, which could keep their lessons going from that same thing. You could do 10 lessons in a day. So maybe there's some consideration of restricting that to how many, like we have, it could fall under the drop off and pickup, is that you can only have 2 deliveries. I mean, there's restrictions of home occupations that it would still technically be falling in, but it's different than a daycare because the lessons are always going to be outside and they're formal.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
maybe a quick follow-up, because, and maybe I misheard, but if you say 7 or more for indoor pool, that seems contrary to your argument that we want less cars parking in front. And listen, my parents, the people that live across the street from them, were in swimming lessons. This is in Nampa. And that's a challenge, right? And they work with the neighbors and borrow spots and all that. But I struggle a little bit to hear we encourage a higher amount of students for indoor lessons than we do for outdoor lessons, but we're saying we want less for outdoor lessons because we want less traffic.
I struggle with that also.
Okay.
So I didn't win when it came to indoor lessons. So lessons used to not be an allowed use. So I didn't win with 7 then. I had said 6 or less, like a daycare, like we allow you to be in care of 6 children. As a person operating lessons, you should only have 6 in your care and considered it like a daycare. And then 7 went in, but 7 just requires neighborhood meetings, which a normal accessory use home occupation doesn't require the neighborhood meetings. So really by saying that you're doing lessons with 7, it initiates that you're going to have a neighborhood meeting, whereas the other ones are just a sign off.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
maybe a suggestion just to move this forward. I would suggest that we settle on 6 because it aligns with daycares, and that we have a public hearing in the future to talk about this further and get people's reaction to that. And then we can try to assess where we're at. I think we could sit here and all debate amongst ourselves, but I don't operate swimming lessons. I don't, you know what I mean? So let's hear from others. I think we can move it forward, but thank you very much for working on this. Very tough issue. Appreciate it.
Okay. Council, who's got the motion? How do you do this? Do you close part of a public hearing? All the public hearing?
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
that's an exceptional question. Before, our staff did a good job of stopping me before I made a motion. That's what I was going to ask our city attorney is do we bring these separate ones back as a separate action, or do we continue this because all of these are listed as one action?
Well, maybe some clarification. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Cavanagh and Bill. In the past, what we've done is we have said we are going to continue the items that were for further discussion, whether they are going back to the committee, whether they're going back to P and Z, or they're going back to, well, it would either be the committee of the public hearing or to staff. The ones that we said to move forward, we needed the direction, bring these items forward, because they still have to come back into you in that form. So that's really the motion we're looking for, is which ones are you directing back to further process, and which one do you want Bill to bring forward?
So with that, Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, Council President, too, if I may just kind of expand on that a little bit. You don't have to keep them active and come back in a month either. Again, if you want me to set it aside for 6 months with the next round when we come forward, happy to do that too. It's really what council wants us to do moving forward, so.
Mr. Mayor? Bill, you were tracking with right where I was kind of headed, so I appreciate that. This is maybe, you track the 4th or 5th time, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move that we close the public hearing on item 6.
Second.
I have a motion second to close the public hearing on item ZOA 2024-0001. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
All right, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I move that we approve item 6, UDC text amendment 2024 ZOA-2024-001 with a couple of modifications. One, that we hold 11-3H1 for staff to continue to work with the UDC focus group and trade associations to provide some greater clarity. To hold 11-4-3-11 to work with staff, council, industry experts on bringing back a revised version of that code. And to bring to council at a date certain the home occupation proposed change for a separate action and public hearing.
A clarification on the motion.
Is there a second to the motion for
I'll
discussion?
second the motion.
I have a second discussion, Councilman Taylor.
I think you may have omitted 11-3H-4D as a topic on the elevation on the highways. You said 11-3H-1 in your motion.
Oh,
And you see it right here,
11-3,
4D.
3H4D.
That was the one we were spending lots of time discussing. So I think you intended to include that, but
Mr. Mayor, my motion was designed to reflect that item, but I erred by naming the appropriate code. And so with Councilman Taylor's correct edit modification, I would amend my motion to include 11-3H-4D.
second.
Did I have a motion second? Clarification, did you mean to have all three in there? I thought we were moving one of them. So which one did you take out just for the?
Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, there was some deliberation about 11-5A-64 being included, pulling that out. I think staff's got feedback. They've got good direction on that. I don't need a separate action around that.
All right.
So it just were the only two being held.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to clarify for the record, we only have two items that are by numerical order being brought back or sent to for their deliberative places.
Correct.
Okay, and the second agrees.
Agree.
Okay, is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries and the item is agreed to. Thank you. Enjoy watching the debate. With that,
Mr. Mayor.
executive session, Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061D.
Second.
Motion second to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. Item is agreed to.